All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session of Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee. I'm joined by my colleagues, Council Vice President Friedson, Council Member Katz. We are starting at about 1:30 on Friday afternoon, and we have a lot to go through before our Friday evening begins. So we're going to start with the Ethics Commission's operating budget. So I'll ask folks to come on down, and we are going to try and go through things pretty quickly this afternoon.
But be very ethical as we do.
Yeah, absolutely. So we thank you all for joining us today for this. Mr. Simon, we want to start with you, and you can walk through the packet.
Good afternoon, Council members. I'm Nazifa Hossein. I'm one of the postgraduate fellows with the Council, and I'll be starting off this work session. I'll begin with an overview. The purpose of the Ethics Commission is to promote the public's trust of county government and to ensure the impartiality of county employees. The Commission exercises authority granted under the Public Ethics Law. Functions of the Commission include administration, financial disclosure, outside employment, lobbying, complaints, investigations and hearings, advisory opinions, waivers and advice, education, legislative and regulatory, coordination and outreach. On page 2 of the packet, there are descriptions to each of these functions. Moving on to the FY24 operating budget, the executive recommends total expenditures of $391,253, an increase of $15,497 from the FY23 approved operating budget. The increases are based on annualization of FY23 compensation increase and proposed FY24 compensation adjustments. For vacancies, the Commission is made up of 2 positions and does not have any vacancies. For racial equity and social justice, the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice developed the budget equity tool for departments to assess the impacts of their programs by centering race in pursuit of equity and justice. The Ethics Commission received a 1 out of 3 stars. A 1 star demonstrates an emerging commitment to advancing racial equity and social justice. On page 3 of the packet, there's an explanation of their rating. Lastly, Council staff recommends approving the Executive's FY24 recommended expenditures for the Ethics Commission.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for an excellent packet. I had a couple of questions to ask. The first one, you want to, would you like to say a few words first, and then we can jump in?
Good afternoon. I'm joined by Aaron Chu. My name is Robert Cobb. I'm joined by Aaron Chu and one of our commissioners, Mary Ann Keefe.
Great, thank you so much. One thing, I think everything looks pretty much in order. The one question I did have was on the racial equity and social justice score. And before I say that, first I just want to say thank you for all the work that you all do on this. It's an incredibly important commission, and I think why understanding better the racial equity and social justice score and some of the work you're all doing in that area would be helpful.
Thank you, Chair Stewart. I must admit that I learned first of our rating on Wednesday when I reviewed the Council packet. And I can say that we'll study what we can legally do in connection with addressing it. To me, it seems a little bit like an audit finding, but there was no audit. So from my standpoint, you know, we're going to have to look at our program to see whether or not there's any real opportunity for course correction that gets us to a better rating. In the budget process, we communicate that the Commission's mandate assures impartiality in the execution of government, and that we promote racial equity by seeking to ensure that county programs are not subject to improper influence and that county employees execute their roles impartially and through the exercise of independent judgment. And the efficient, impartial execution of government responsibilities benefits everyone. As a reactive compliance program with a set mandate and with no evidence that could suggest discrimination of any kind, any programmatic effort to remedy societal discrimination would be legally suspect. Nonetheless, we'll dedicate resources to see what we can do. And here's some steps I outlined to that end. I've reached out to Tiffany Ward for assistance in what we can do. Aaron Chu and I will each take the 9 hours of training associated with the racial equity program. I note that since OMB, and part of the reasons that this was a little bit off, admittedly off of my radar, was that we used to have a complement of three persons in our office, and one was dedicated to, among other administrative tasks, the budget activity. And after we had a departure in 2019, we went from a complement from 3 down to 2 people. And over the objection of the Ethics Commission, OMB snatched the additional position and put it over in the Shared Services Center, where we do get a lot of help in connection with our budget preparation and other administrative things like procurement. Nonetheless, we don't have administrative staff to address issues like these and other mandates that are different than the mandates, the substantial mandates that we have by law for execution of the Ethics Commission's role. So I've put racial equity on the agenda for the Ethics Commission's meeting on May 9, where we'll begin the dialogue at the Commission level in connection with what we might be able to do, if anything, further than what we already do. And I note I had a sentiment of we'll do what's legally possible, and I refer the committee to, and I can provide a copy of what I found just on brief research, a Congressional Research Service document called Equal Protection, Strict Scrutiny of Racial Classifications, dated April 27, 2023, which I think does a decent job of articulating the legal landscape for programs that, and were criticized for not having a racial prism through which we look at our programs. And I think there's some legal hurdles in connection with doing that. But there's plenty of investigation to do to become educated, not the least of which is the training that's offered. So, thank you.
Great, Mr. Happ. I very much appreciate you taking the time, and I know when we spoke to Ms. Ward and reviewed the Racial Equity and Social Justice Department, she did say that they are reaching out more to departments and talking to them. I am sorry that you only learned of your score on Wednesday, and I very much appreciate the fact that you were able to take the time to address that concern today in the little time you have, and I'm glad that the Commission is taking that up on May 9th, and I think we all see this work as work in progress, and I very much appreciate you taking it seriously and taking steps to see what can be done. I'll turn it over to my colleagues. No? Anything else you would like to share with us?
No, thank you for the money that we have to run our program.
Great.
Thank you for using it.
Well, thank you so much, and I just again want to express our deep appreciation for all the work you do.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for that. Next, we will move on to the Office of Legislative Oversight. Okay. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Mr. Seeler, are you going to kick us off?
Sure. So I'm Chris Tyler. I'm the Director of the Office of Legislative Oversight. Our budget is pretty much the same level service budget as last year. This proposed from the executive is $2,366,474. It's just an increase, which is salary-based, which is what most of our office is. We have no vacancies, and we got a 3 out of 3 on our racial equity and social justice score. I have no requests for change in the budget. I know that you wanted to discuss a proposal from Councilmember Mink, but as far as our budget goes, we're fine with what was allocated by the executive.
Great. Thank you for that, and thank you also for lifting up your racial equity and social justice score, and thank you for your department's work in that area. We did have a recommendation. Oh, do you have any questions before we go on to Councilmember Mink? Okay, we did have a recommendation or a request from Councilmember Mink for a budget reconciliation item. And Cecilia, do you feel comfortable speaking to that?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to what I think about the idea. From my perspective, it's a good methodological tool. So canvassing and going door to door is just something we don't do in our office. We don't do a lot of interviews with individuals in the neighborhoods and communities. It's a resource issue for the most part. The time that it takes to go out and do those types of interviews and canvassing is significant. It would benefit some of our research pieces, our longer pieces. I think in particular from this year, like we did a report on, or we're finishing up a report on senior housing. We sent out a pretty in-depth survey with a good methodological approach to HOC housing for seniors, and to have supplemented that with interviews would have been helpful. Next year we might be doing a report on homelessness. Again, those are clientele that we're not going to necessarily be able to meet and talk to easily, and so from a resource capacity that would help our office. There was other proposals, I guess, how that would be run for the different council members, being able to use canvassing, and for the sixth floor staff as well. That would be something I guess we would manage in the way that we would manage the NDA and the audit, which we would oversee it and work with the council members and council staff. So I don't know anything really other than what Councilmember Mink proposed, and I did look into the group that she mentioned in the email, and what they do is good work, I think. And it would also, I think this would have to be obviously put out for a bid and to see, who you would get. But as far as an example of canvassing and getting information, we could use it, and I think it would be something that would be useful. The budget is tight, and that's something I don't want to speak this priority over other priorities, but so that's kind of where I am on that.
Great. Council Vice President Friedson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the comments. I think we have to figure out how to do this work holistically, and I do think we had this conversation with the PIO and wanted to talk about how we were going to really think through intentionally of how we address being proactive in our engagement, recognizing that the loudest voices are not necessarily representative of all the voices, and the people who actually show up to meetings that we have at certain times don't necessarily reflect the broad breadth of the community, and the community has changed dramatically from what the county looked like when I grew up, certainly when my parents grew up, really in just an even shorter period of time than that. But I think we need to really think through holistically and comprehensively how we do this work. I am particularly uncomfortable with the idea of council members using canvassing. I mean, that sounds like a political campaign to me, and so I think we need to be very cautious about that. And I personally would like to hear from OLO to take some time to really think through what this would look like, and actually, like on a project by project basis, explain us, because I mean, you use contractors in other instances, and I imagine there are cases where a contractor like this could be used, but I think it would be helpful for us to really think through what this would look like from an OLO standpoint, how it would be used, and which of the projects that you have, and then how much that would cost, and for us to think through it. I don't think we're ready for that at this point, personally. And similarly, because I think we might talk about this additionally later on in the meeting, I think we have to be much more comprehensive in how we address these issues broadly than we're being right now, because it feels like, however well-intentioned they are, and I think Councilmember Mink's proposal here is very well-intentioned, and I appreciate where she's coming from, and I share her concern for what the challenge is, but it feels like we're doing it in kind of a hodgepodge type of way, where we're throwing a little bit of money to this department to do a little bit of this work here, and maybe thinking about throwing some money to this department to do a little bit of that work there. And I think we need a much more comprehensive and holistic view of how county government is communicating with our residents, how we are doing our work, and what resources and new approaches do we need in order to do it better and to do it in a way that is more representative of the growing and diverse community that we have, and I don't think that that work has quite happened yet, and so I think that we need to spend some time over the next several months to prepare for moving forward.
It's not often that I agree with every word that the Council Vice President has said, but I do agree with exactly what he said. I think that this is a good suggestion. I'm concerned, first off, in this budget on $150,000, though percentage-wise is a very small amount. In general, I don't know what it actually buys us, and I don't know if we're spending on communication, whether OLO should remind us of what's the best way to communicate. Maybe you should do a report on that. But go ahead. I don't.
No, I mean, I guess the thing that I would say in regard to this particular proposal, I don't view this as outreach. I mean, I'm viewing this from my perspective of this is actual research into projects. So, you know, again, I get the definition, and when we're going out and talking to residents, the engagement that I'm looking for is really to supplement a research report. And so when I'm speaking on this, I'm speaking on this in behalf of strictly, would this help our research? Yes, it would help our research. In terms of communicating to residents, you know, I completely agree with Councilmember Friedson that that's a larger discussion that's happening, you know, among the different council offices. And so looking at this proposal from Councilmember Mink, my view on it is strictly on how it would be used to supplement research, to be asking questions that would help with reports, to asking questions that would maybe be done annually, where you go from district to district to district and get actual information. The interesting thing, the one thing I will say in terms of canvassing and door-to-door stuff, it's the one area where methodologically, and I'm a methodologist, so this is interesting to me, the one area from a methodological perspective, this is one where you actually get lower income residents responding at a higher rate than you do higher income residents, just because of who's answering the door and how easy it is to access communities. So, you know, I'm only looking at this from that one lens point and not from the overarching community interaction, which I think is a whole different discussion, and I completely understand, you know, why that would fall from this perspective. So,
in bottom line, we're talking about a budget here.
Yep.
I am not supportive of the 150, the suggested amount. I don't know, and I did have a chat with Councilmember Mink about how they came to the figure that they came to. But in this year's budget, we certainly, that's a pretty good mountain for us to climb. And in addition, I do think we need a lot of additional information on if we're going to spend the additional funds on something, whether this is the best something we should be spending. So I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Steeler, I know, like, as Council Vice President Friedson mentioned, that you do have money for contracts and other things. And do you see, as you're looking at your budget for the next year or so, the ability to explore this idea of using?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a way that we could do it. Is, you know, first kind of a test thing is put out a small bid for, you know, one where we would actually be helpful to go out and to do that type of canvassing. I mean, in general, we have money in there, roughly $50,000 to $75,000 to spend on contracting when we don't have the resources in-house to be able to look at an issue in particular, or when an issue falls too close to the council where we want to get some distance between us and who's actually collecting the data. So yeah, we have some money that we would be able to do a small contract, kind of as a test.
Because I think what Councilmember Mink gave us as a proposal under the $150,000 was one large project and 3 small projects, or 7 to 8 small projects. So if it's, what I'm hearing from you is that it may be in your budget moving forward, you might be able to look at doing something like this, and then in next year's budget we could hear back from you on how well that proceeded, and if it's something that we feel like needs to be expanded upon, we would learn from that.
Yeah, I certainly could do that.
Does that sound good? All right, I think that's it. Anything else?
No, I'm good with budget as proposed.
Great, wonderful. All right, well, thank you very much, and thank you for all your work. Yep, now we have the independent audit. Oh, and you stay here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say Blaze, not so.
Yeah.
Hi, Blaze DeFazio, OLO. The independent audit NDA, it's the same services budget. There's only a minor increase for personnel services of $3,600.
Okay, any objection? Nope, we're good.
Thank you.
Good job. Yeah.
Yay. All right, now we have the Charter Review Commission, and we have Ms. Wellens. Okay, Ms. Wellens?
Thank you. The proposed budget for the Charter Review Commission has an increase of $1,000, bringing it to a total of $1,150 for its operating expenses. This is essentially a same services budget in that the Charter Review Commission's work is cyclical. During every even year, it has a report due to the council, and that's why it has the increased expenses in the even years. Thank you.
Any questions?
Notwithstanding, it's a 6,667% increase, I think, without objection.
All right, without objection, thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
that. And now we will move on to the council office budget, and we have Ms. Michelson. I know. Get too many pieces of paper.
And try to match it, it's fun, really.
Good afternoon. So with the chair's indulgence, I'd like to take one moment to thank and recognize our wonderful administrative services manager. Sandra Marin has so many roles at the council, and I don't get the opportunity to thank her enough publicly for all she does. I do not know how this office would be able to do anything without her, but one of her roles is helping construct the budget, so she's here for that purpose today. So the council office budget is basically a same services budget. The significant increase you see is simply because we had 2 new council member offices created last year. So the increases in this year's budget is just the annualization of the costs of the additional staff that were added with the new council members. And there was one inflationary addition to the budget, and that was a $40,000 increase for council member offices to provide a small growth in their operating budgets. And consistent with how you've handled all other budgets, my recommendation would be that this go on the reconciliation list as a high priority. I also wanted to raise the issue of vacancies because the council's been going through vacancies for each office. And there is an attachment to your packet that lists all of the vacancies. And as you will see on Circle 4, many of these are not funded vacancies. For the funded vacancies, all but 3 are either filled or in active stages of recruitment. The 3 that are not currently in active stages of recruitment are a manager 2, that's the level of our senior legislative analysts, and 2 administrative positions. And we've had discussions with the council about the new demands placed on our staff from an administrative perspective, both because of new council members and because we went to a non-merit system. So we do see ourselves filling one of those administrative positions, but feel that should the committee wish to do so, we could lapse the manager position and the other administrative position. This means we're tight on staff in that all of our staff positions will be filled, and it doesn't give us the opportunity to grow our staff of legislative analysts, but given the concerns about the current budget, that may be an appropriate place to be.
Thank you. Let's take each of these one at a time. First, on the inflationary increases, any objections or questions? No, so that one is fine. And then regarding the vacancies in staffing, any questions on that? Or
I just want to make sure I'm understanding, is this being offered as a staff recommendation?
Yes, the staff recommendation is to increase the lapse for those positions. So I think no objection with that.
Okay.
You can do that.
And that's it for the council office budget.
All right.
We'll move on to the legislative communications.
One second, Councilor.
I just wanted to jump in, and when you were starting to talk about Ms. Marin, you said about how you don't know how your office can run. I don't know how our office can run without Ms. Marin.
Yeah.
And I mean that very publicly, and I sincerely thank her very publicly. She does a fabulous job for each one of our council offices. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on to the legislative branch communications outreach NDA. Ms. Healy could not be with us today, but even in her absence, I'll take a moment to compliment her and say what an incredible job our communications team does. Their services to the council and the county have dramatically changed each year over the past few years. Everything from helping us go remote during the pandemic to finding all kinds of new ways to involve all of our citizens. We have a new multicultural communications manager who's here with us today. And we're just continuing to explore new options, including the council members did not notice at our last couple of public hearings where we expected participants and people there who did not speak English. We had simultaneous translation. We had translations on site. It was just incredible the way the services continue to grow. This budget, we have recommended a couple of increases for FY24 that I want to bring to your attention. One is that even though we've done a wonderful job serving the Spanish-speaking community with several staff members now who do speak Spanish and a translator, we don't have similar capacity for the Asian American community, and in particular have no capability for on-site translation. We think that having an outreach staff person that would deal broadly with the Asian American community and also have the ability to do translation into traditional Chinese would be very helpful. At the same time, we've asked for increased funding for translation services. We've exceeded what we've allocated in prior years. As some of you may know, a lot of our council materials now are being translated into multiple languages. So we did request an increase of $30,000 for translation services. And finally, in our budget, we have requested $10,000 to begin to experiment with using paid advertisement in ethnic media that we haven't traditionally had access to in the past, and that we don't reach through our normal means of press releases and all the other things we do where there's not a price tag. We included $10,000 in the budget. You received a recommendation from council members Fanny Gonzalez and Albornoz who liked the idea but thought we had not allocated enough money. And we have a memo from them in our in your staff report that is their recommendation that the amount of funding be $315,000. And they've indicated all the reasons why they think this is important and the significant contributions that can be made by having these additions. So the staff recommendation is to obviously put these on the reconciliation list, not fund them within the budget, and make them all high priorities. And I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you. I had a question regarding, thank you for the packet and all the work on this, particularly on the translation services, because when we had the community engagement cluster before us a couple of weeks ago, they're increasing their translation services. I think we've all seen in action the wonderful translation services we have for our public hearings, and I guess I'm trying to figure out like how all these pieces work together, and in particular when my own office did a session working with the tenants from Arrive. We actually were able to use the translators from the community partnerships, but then we were also told that we may have to pay for translators. So I guess I'm trying to figure out when do individual council offices may need to pay for translators if they're doing something versus what we're seeing here in the budget. If you could kind of lay that out a little better.
Absolutely. So the communication team supports the council as the body and the council president's office, and that is their primary objective. There are some, we have protocols for when they assist individual council members. For example, they assist with a certain number of press releases and press conferences a year, but it's limited and the funding is limited. So I won't, like this amount of money by no means would enable us to provide services to every different, to the 11 council member offices. If I remember correctly, translating a recent council document into Chinese was a $5,000 cost. So with a $30,000 increase, we wouldn't even get to do one document per office. So to the extent that the council members feel that their individual offices need additional capacity, I would go back to the operating budget increase we're providing, which is just a small fraction of what those costs may be, and we may need to explore additional funding for your individual budgets to be able to do that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'll just kind of reiterate the point I made before. We have Office of Community Partnerships, we have PIO, we have the Council of Communications NDA, probably other areas too. We're now talking about potentially OLO, although I know that some is seen as the same and to others is seen as quite different. I think we have to do a much better job of coordinating across county government, and I don't think it's clear, obviously even to council members, of when you want to partner with the Office of Community Partnerships to do outreach and to do translation services, or when it's the communications department, when it's PIO on the executive side. And I think, in many ways, I think the council has been stepping up its communications and outreach efforts because we've been dissatisfied with the engagement, particularly in the hardest to reach communities under the PIO. And we've been trying to supplement, and I am thrilled about your new hire who's sitting behind you, who is not new at all, and I just want to make that point, because she and her old boss were supplementing in many ways, even from an individual council member office, translating documents and translating in real time at events, sitting right next to me, actually, which shouldn't need to happen, but unfortunately had to happen. So there's clearly a need here. I just have a little bit of heartburn, I guess, if you want to call it that, about the fact that it doesn't feel like we are looking holistically across county government to coordinate these efforts so it's very clear who does what, and then at times when we are dissatisfied, it feels like rather than addressing that issue directly, we're supplementing it somewhere else. We're not happy with PIO, so OCP is getting funding to do work that I think PIO maybe should do, or PIO is doing something that some other department isn't doing. And I think we have to address that. I really do. So, I appreciate the council staff recommendation. I do think we, have been moving in this direction. I think our colleagues, they bring up a really good point, but I think, we really need to be thoughtful in that proposal. It's a significant increase from what the original proposal was, and I think it is in some ways overlapping some other proposals from some other departments that I think we need to really sit down and think through what we're doing county-wide, not just council-wide, on how we're reaching communities to talk about the issues that they're facing and the programs that we are funding and providing to make sure that they're getting access to the services that we know that they desperately need. But I think that we need to do that part first. So I'll just make that point. I'll yield back to colleagues.
Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of, we said before, communication is the key to success in general in the whole world, and especially for government. And I think, though, as we continue to go forward, we need to continually evaluate and perfect what we're doing and how we're doing it. I can honestly say that Sonia Healy and her entire team do an unbelievable job for Montgomery County. It's, and we say that Montgomery County is larger than 6 states. That's not an easy thing easy area to communicate. but they do, and they do a terrific job. And obviously, I agree that the new hire really isn't that new. Now, he said your old boss. If Nancy's watching, I'm saying it was your former boss. Please, Nancy, please remember that it was Andrew that said.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I hope for her sake she's not watching on a Friday afternoon, and I am going to text her and ask her. But I hope she's not watching.
Okay, and I agree with that. However, but I do think on the one point that the chair mentioned about, when do you go back to the individual council offices, when something like she was discussing, when that case was a horrible tragedy that is certainly dealing with more than her office. Her office took the lead and should and go through. But I think when we need to evaluate that is for an entire county rather than an individual office. So I think, that's not part of this budget exactly, but I do think we have to figure that part out. But I'm good with as suggested. Thanks.
Okay. Just so we have clarity.
Yes, please. I was just going to ask.
If I'm correct, the first thing that we need to address is the new position to serve as a liaison to the AAPI community and the additional operating funds for translation and community engagement, and if that should be placed on the reconciliation list and as how. And I think, Councilmember Katz, if I'm interpreting your comment correctly, you would be good adding it. Is that a priority or a high priority?
A high priority.
A high priority. I would also add that as a high priority. I think, Councilmember, you're okay with that, so that we would add. Then the second item was the funding request from Council Members Fanny Gonzalez and Councilmember Albanaz's proposal moving forward. And Councilmember Katz, where were you on that?
I'm priority.
Priority, not high priority. Priority. Okay. Councilmember Vice President Friesen.
I'm comfortable just saying that.
All right. I think we, as a council, we're comfortable with a priority on that, and we can bring that to the full council for discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's it for you all. All right. And now we have the Office of the County Executive. Say something.
Have you noticed some people bring an entourage with them? Have you noticed? An entourage.
All right. Welcome, everyone.
Gene, there's a space here for you. I mean,
oh, yes, please join us.
Every day Gene says, "Can I go to the council today?"
Yeah.
He's always.
He used to say that when he was here.
Well, welcome. We are glad to see you all this afternoon. And if you want to, Mr. Manlian, do you want to walk through things for us?
I just wanted to thank you for your consideration of this budget. Of the vacancies, I don't know how far you want us to get into the details of the vacancies on the list. We have Mr. Baskin here because two of them are working with the innovation program. We are moving forward with filling both of them. One took a lot of time because we rethought the position during the fiscal year. Remember, the Office of the County Executive sometimes functions as an incubator for a program that is created jointly by the executive and the council. So the Office of Food Systems Resiliency and the Police Accountability Board both started this year in the county executive's office. So you will see those positions move elsewhere in the budget. But obviously, we hired Heather Bruskin to run the Office of Food Systems Resiliency. She's interviewing for the other two positions. The Police Accountability Board, we hired Fatmata Berry as the executive director. We have an offer out, I think, for the SEA in that position. So we are moving forward with filling all of those positions. And I was remiss in not thanking Talia Parker, who actually does all of the administrative and budget work for the Office of the County Executive, and has played a key role in keeping all of these other initiatives up and running as we launch them into their own organizations.
Great, awesome. All right, do we want to just walk through the list, and colleagues just tell me when you'd like to stop and discuss one. On the reconciliation item list, we have the first is the addition of one special projects manager position. The staff recommendation is priority for that.
High priority for that.
Oh.
I'm sorry, but the staff recommendation is high priority.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it is. I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to.
I'm sorry.
No, okay, I wasn't trying to argue.
No, no.
I was, yes. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate it. This is a position that, was created by the council. There was a candidate. The candidate is no longer moving forward. I do not think we should fund it. I don't think it should be a high priority or a priority. I appreciate the executive branch in moving this forward, but I really don't think that we should be funding it at this time. I think we need to reassess, like for the executive branch to come back and explain. We were told that we had a candidate who was uniquely positioned and qualified to do this particular work. I think there are some open questions about the future of the position. Those are legitimate. I think we should have that discussion, but I think in light of budget constraints, I would much prefer to be funding services than to create a new position where it's unclear at this point what the direction of the position is.
Thank you. Councilmember Katz?
Thank you. I agree with the staff recommendation. We were going to hire for this position. It was not about an individual person, though part of the discussion became about the individual who was highly qualified or more than highly qualified for the job. But I do believe we need the position, so I'm fine with high priority.
And I'll stay with Councilmember Katz on this and continue it as a high priority. So it's who's taking notes here on this one? All right. All right. Sounds good through full council.
You really are like Craig.
All right. We don't need to discuss the inflationary adjustment. The next is the enhanced quality leadership forums, the QLF programs for $10,000. That is a high priority. I did have one question about this because when we spoke with the director of HR, we had a great conversation about where she's taking that department, and she's doing amazing work. The whole team there really is, and it's very exciting to see some of the things that she's planning for the future, and we talked about the different trainings and leadership. So I guess my question would be, does this make sense to be over in HR versus the executive's office?
So first of all, thank you very much for that compliment of the work of the Office of Human Resources and Tracy Anderson. I don't know if you know this in your district. We had the hiring fair on Wednesday evening. We had, I think, more than 700 people come through. Many people got job interviews right there, so it was a successful work, and I'm thrilled. I think we're all thrilled with our collaboration with Tracy and a new sense of urgency and approach to hiring in the Office of Human Resources. The Quarterly Leadership Forum has been for many years now in the Office of the County Executive. It was created during the Duncan administration. It has gone through some modifications, but it has always been part of the executive's office. One of the things that the county executive has talked about, Ms. Kassiri and I have spent a lot of time talking about, is how in the Great Recession, many of our training programs got jettisoned, and really we need to do a much better job of training and offering training and educational opportunities, but specifically we have to work with our management service about improving leadership and improving their management. We've got a great new partnership with OHR and with the universities at Shady Grove to bring more training to our managers. So that's traditionally why it's been in the Office of the County Executive, and I think for a small amount of money, I would ask that this stay on the high priority list because of the value of motivating, training, energizing our management service, which exceeds 400 people, I think, across the county government, including police and fire.
Great. And yes, thank you for the hiring fair. We did have, my chief of staff was there, said it was a great event, very high energy.
We tried to hire her.
Yeah, don't do that.
Cool. You did that before the budget? That was clever.
She said she had the best job possible, so.
Yeah. All right. So I think with that, I'm fine keeping this in the budget where it is. I just, again, as you all are looking at things and as Director Anderson builds things out, I trust you'll see where that needs to go in the future. Council Vice President Friedson.
Yeah, I wouldn't include it as a high priority. I appreciate it. I just think this is a budget that has a 10% property tax increase in it. That we have at some point have to start having a conversation about nice to have and need to have. And I understand this is a small amount of money. It's not going to break the bank in one way or another, but I think we at a certain point need to make decisions. The funding was eliminated during the Great Recession, and we're deciding to bring it back in a budget where we're asking people to pay a 10% property tax. And I just can't see how that is an easy conversation to have with residents, and I don't think it's an easy conversation to have even with county employees who we're going to have to make some tough choices even in programs that they're implementing, that this is the best use of the limited taxpayer dollars that we have. So I would prefer that it not be included at all, or at the very least as a priority, not a high priority.
Councilmember Katz.
I'm fine with high priority.
Okay. So that goes in as high priority. And then I had a question on the last one, which is the increased cost for boards, committees, and commissions, customer relationships management software contract. I wasn't actually sure why this got put on the reconciliation, because it seems to me that this is something we have to do. No?
Good afternoon, Talia Parker, Administrative Services Manager with Office of the County Executive. So it is currently a contract that we have in place. It's an annual renewal, and from talking to TEBS, the cost could slightly increase this year from what we've been paying historically for the service to help manage the boards, committees, and commissions, and the on-bringing of the new boards and the setup of the members. So that's why it's included in the packet.
All right. I mean, it seems like a required cost, so I would ask that this should not, this shouldn't.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. No, so that if it's gonna be in the budget. How about that? It doesn't even get on reconciliation.
Yeah.
It's in there. I think that's it until we move on to OPEB. Is that correct? Anything else for the county exec's office?
I was remiss in not introducing everyone here. Hopefully you know everyone up here.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I'm sorry. Thank you. I was going too fast. We do have the items reviewed by the Econ Committee. There were 3 items, and who do I turn that over to? Mr. Weissman?
Thank you, Councilmember, and appreciate the time. The Econ Committee met last week discussing the business center. Specifically, there was a request for 2 increased business liaisons. As the council knows, these are staff who are going out into the community to proactively engage with businesses to find problems and solve them, as well as engaging with businesses as they bring problems in. The hope is to increase this 2 more staffers to better allow the team to go out and talk to businesses as well as handle them in an efficient manner. You did see earlier a vacancy in the business advancement team. An offer has been made and accepted in that position. That's for our 3rd business liaison, and that person is starting, I believe, at the end of this month, the beginning of next month. But these 2 positions would allow us to further enhance the ability to work directly with businesses. What the Econ Committee recommended was 1 position as priority and 1 position 6-month lapsed as high priority.
Okay. Council Vice President Friedson, did you want to speak to this?
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate it. I think Mr. Weissman is doing a terrific job. I appreciate the fact that after a lot of stops and starts of how this business outreach work was going to happen, we seem to have a model that is moving forward. It was in the regional service centers. It was out of the regional service centers. It was now not in the second floor, but working in collaboration with the regional service centers. It seems like under your leadership, Mr. Weissman, which I appreciate, it's moving in a positive direction. Having said that, I don't think we should be adding new positions for this purpose in this particular budget. I think it can wait till next year. I think if you ask most businesses, would they rather pay a property tax increase or have 2 new business liaisons? I have yet to find a business that has told me that they'd be more interested in hiring more business liaisons. So if our goal here is to help businesses, support businesses, reach out to businesses, I think they're frankly more concerned about property tax increase than they are about these positions. I think these positions could help, and I think they are a positive in a scenario where we have resources to support them and to do it, but I don't think that this is the time and this is the year. I think we should continue on the positive work that you're doing and then reassess next year. I don't think it's not a bad proposal. It's not a bad idea. I think they could do some good work, but in the interest of deciding what people really care about or most concerned about, I don't think that this is their high priority, and so I don't think it should be our high priority either.
Mr. Weissman, can you remind it how many folks do we have filling these positions right now?
Sure. There's currently 3, and just for perspective, there's about 33,000 businesses in the county, about 28,000 that don't fall under the strategic industries that MCEDC handles.
Great. So we have 3 for the county right now.
Correct.
Full-time positions.
Full-time positions.
Great. I very much appreciate the comments of Council Vice President Friedson. And as I'm looking at the budget, I'm also looking at what are things we need to put in place to actually make sure that we are increasing our revenues in the county. And I think keeping our businesses afloat and attracting new businesses is really important. We've talked a lot. The county executive was talking this morning about how we need to, streamline our systems and help businesses get online more. So I actually see this as an investment in ways that we are going to actually be able to grow revenue in our county moving forward. So I would actually move to make both of these positions high priority with a 6 months lapse.
If I could just jump in. So the Econ Committee was assigned the task of looking at the business center team, and then the GO Committee of trying to do the whole budget. And of course, you can disagree with your colleagues in the Econ Committee, but I just wanted to make sure you understood they are the committee that, is taking the lead on this. And we'll give you that opportunity, but at least I wanted to clarify that. And one of the major issues that they talked about was the fact that there was one existing position, one that had been hired in November, and one just hired, is my understanding. And so the committee thought that it would be worthwhile to spend a little time adjusting to having these 3 staff members before bringing on additional staff, which is why they said only 1 and lapse at 6 months so that there's a phase-in of all these new staff. So just to make sure that their recommendations were clear.
Thank you. Councilmember Hess.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I always quote myself, but I believe it is necessary to give someone the resources that are necessary to do a job. And I think, and I agree that if you ask someone whether you should have to spend some additional funds or not, most people are going to go for the not. Having said that, when someone says, I need help, to say, we're going to help you, but it's going to take, I don't know, 6 months more or a year more, that's not really helping them. That business could die while you're getting the assistance needed. So I believe we do need to make it high priority, and I also believe because we're saying let's wait 6 months or whatever the numbers, the months are, it takes us 4 months beyond that once we say let's start hiring. I believe we should start the process so that someone can be hired 6 months down the road or whatever, so that they're actually in place helping the businesses that need help. This is a lifeblood in some cases. So I'm for doing it that way, to say it can be the 6 months, but that they could advertise, et cetera, before that.
Council Vice President Friedson.
I appreciate that, and I understand this isn't going to go my way, but I just want to clarify, if it lapses at 6 months, it doesn't prevent the department from initiating the process. It just acknowledges that you can't spend the money because you don't have the resources, unless you have 1,500 vacancies of funding to play with, of course. Wouldn't have the resources to have someone in place before the 6-month process. So I just want to clarify, if you fully fund it, it would mean you're providing them funding when they couldn't possibly have somebody in place. If you lapse it a certain amount, you're giving some time to do it. So I thought it was important to clarify that.
Are you in agreement with that? That you can start advertising it before?
I defer to,
Once it's created through the system, OMB has to sign off on it, OHR, there's a process for it to go through before you advertise it, because OMB has to approve that, yes, there is money for the position before it is funded.
Advertise it before.
So
Yes,
we could.
yes, you can, as
Yes.
long as
Yeah.
it has been approved in the budget, you can advertise it in advance, as long as the person doesn't start,
Okay.
too far in advance.
I just want to clarify, again, not
All right.
going my way, but that was.
No. I
So-
appreciate clarification.
I just want to double check and thank you for the clarification on the Econ Committee. The recommendation is 2-1 from the GO Committee to keep both positions as high priority and last for 6 months.
Yes.
Yes.
that-
And then we can reconcile that with the full council. The next was enhance the marketing for the White Oak Science Gateway. This was a reduction recommended by the Econ Committee. Any objections to taking theirs? Nope. And then the other was enhance the Business Center Customer Relationships Management System software to improve services to businesses. $20,000. Econ said high priority for that.
Well, could I just ask a question about these? Because I think this is important just from a process standpoint. This is a new council with new committee jurisdiction, but there is a committee recommendation process, and that does change the rules of procedure in terms of amending on the floor or accepting the committee recommendation. So I think it's important to clarify. We could either not take a position, there would already be a committee recommendation, or you could provide, the GEO committee could be providing an advisory opinion that we then would be voting on as members of the full body. Is that accurate?
So the committee recommendation on the floor will come from the Econ Committee,
Right.
and we will note where members of the GEO Committee have a different view, but the committee recommendation will be the Econ Committee.
I think we could take this up at full council.
Yeah, I think
personally.
that's fine with me. And I just ask, and again, new committees, new council,
New
that is
process.
clear in the packet, the
Yes.
actions that each of the committees are requested to do. So,
Absolutely.
Didn't actually do the business center. I'm fine with what they're suggesting. Didn't actually say-
yeah, I think that's fine, the business center. And then we talked a little bit about the vacancy. Does anyone have any questions about the vacancy list? Okay. Council Vice President Friedson.
Yeah, could you just talk briefly about the Innovation Accelerated Performance Management and Data Analysts and the Performance Management and Data Analysts 2 and the 3 and then the Office Program Manager? What do those jobs do? Where are we exactly? I know you mentioned that you were hiring for them, but
Sure. Mr. Baskin is coming up because he has led our innovation efforts. So what we're trying to do is the Accelerator program is the program where we actually bring county employees together to work on how they might re-envision their job, their task, the services that they provide. That has turned out to be a very effective and a much sought out opportunity for employees. And so what we're trying to do, and there was a delay in why this has been vacant for so long this year, is it was actually doing something else in the innovation program, and that position became vacant. The conversation was around how do we bring another person on so it's not just Michael Baskin who's been doing this program solely, as an individual with the colleagues, but helping him actually be able to have more of the accelerator program.
Yeah. G, you got to hit your button. Welcome. Yep, there you go.
I knew innovation would need help with technology.
Yeah.
So to clarify, that's not what we do. We have, luckily, Director Roper there. I'm Michael. I serve as a resource and advocate for people making things better, many of whom are in the Innovation Accelerator community. We thought this position was originally filled with someone outside of government, and we realized that we needed to fill this with someone inside of government, and we didn't have for the skill sets needed for this role. It took a while to figure out who's out there, but we're now hiring in this role. Their KPIs for their first year are to launch 100 new accelerators over 4 cohorts to deliver 100 new innovations, to support accelerators in delivering 100 new innovations, and then to have 1 full department trained. So we have cohorts who are now backlogged because I failed to fill this position in a timely manner. But we are ready to hire. The job is in the process of being posted right now. And the rest of the team put together this handy how to hire in 30 days, which means I'm on the hook for hiring in 30 days.
Okay.
And I'm happy to answer
There's
any
100
questions.
new accelerators. Can you just describe what the accelerators are, what
Sure.
they do, and what the outcomes are that come from them?
Absolutely. So we have about 120 so far from all departments. An accelerator is a person. Yep, it's a county employee. Some of them are department directors who have been promoted into that position, and others are executive aides. And so what they do is they go through a structured problem-solving approach to make things better. So for example, improving scheduling of people who are experiencing homelessness and their need for dental services. They have made permitting processes better, and they're working in the procurement to make the procurement team better as well. And so Ash has actually asked for the entire procurement team to get a training on this, and I've been putting off until I could get this hire in place.
Okay, so the Innovation Accelerator Performance Management and Data Analytics, that's a trainer, or that's the person who's assessing whether or not the accelerators accelerating is actually working?
All of the above. They will be training, but we have past accelerators lead the training. So they will make sure the entire thing comes together. So yes,
Okay.
they will be running the training.
They'll be running the training. And then what does the Performance Management and Data Analyst 2 do? Like the same position, but a lower level person?
There's one for the Innovation Accelerator.
And there's the Performance Management, that's a different person. Sorry.
That position is a position associated with the Office of Food Resiliency. So that was one of the 3 positions. There are 3 positions here.
Got it.
That are part of the Office of Food Systems Resiliency.
We've only hired 1, and so that's what the other
That's
2
been
vacancies
Heather,
are.
right? And
So the Office Program Manager is also for the Office of Food
Yeah.
Resiliency?
Yep. And they will appear in their own budget.
But they're going to be out of this budget and that
Correct.
budget starting.
FY20, July 1st, should you?
Okay, and okay, I'll get to those in a second. So on this one, do you have a list of the accelerators are the people?
Yes.
Okay, who are just trained to do creative thinking and try to find innovations, it sounds like.
A bunch of things like Lean Six Sigma, process improvement, and human-centered design. So they are trained, but they also have to actually do the thing. We don't say, hey, great, you were trained. We say, did you actually make something better in your community?
Okay, and then do we have a list of that and that you can share with us of like what this has actually accomplished and what we've seen?
Yeah, more than happy to.
And are these cost savings?
Yes, some of them are quite significant cost savings, and lots of them are cost savings in people's time. So we've had forms digitized, which I know is something that you've cared about and really been a major supporter of, as well as things like when you're trying to schedule for a family who has disabilities for their advocates, those were getting dropped, and the paperwork was then creating paperwork on top of paperwork. And so they set up, with working with each other, not with me as the trainer, they set up a faster scheduling process to ensure that families got the services they needed in a timely manner.
Okay, I appreciate it. Well, first of all, I think it would be helpful for us to get a list of the things that have actually happened as a result of this.
Sure.
Sounds like there's been some interesting things, which I think would be helpful for us to understand. And then the second piece is, this is a leadership development tool, it seems like, more than anything. This is just trying to help people within county government think more creatively, learn about new processes and ways of thinking about things, which there are like 7 other ways in which we seem to be doing similar things to this, from my perspective at least, of management development and leadership development, but they don't seem to be connected. So it's not your issue, but maybe the accelerators can help us to innovate, to think about ways for the left hand and the right hand, even within the executive branch, to talk more directly, because it seems like in the executive branch we have some of this, we have some of it in OHR, we have some of it in different areas, and it would seem to make sense that somebody is overseeing all of the management and leadership development that we are doing, to make sure that the synapses are firing and everybody's moving in the same direction. Because it does feel like, and I talked about this on the communication side of it and the outreach side of things, but in this as well, it does seem like this is a conglomeration of a hodgepodge of different ideas, all of which are good ideas. There's nothing wrong with any of the individual ideas. I don't really have a concern about that, but my concern is more at the macro level of how these different efforts within different departments are interfacing. And I think, at least my understanding was, this is the purpose of the office of the county executive. This is the purpose that we were hoping that the innovation office could serve. And I think to take it to a next level, that would be an area that I would hope to see. But I had questions, you answered them. I appreciate on that. My only other question, it's not directly tied to this, but it's related to the White Oak Planning Coordinator. There's a shift that's happening. It's not a budget impact, but it's a shift to this department's budget impact, because it's shifting to the department from the capital fund, from my understanding. Could you just there have been lots of conversations about the White Oak Coordinator. It was split 50-50. It's been moved in all different places. There's been different views of how it should be used. Could we just get an update on whether that position is encumbered and how it's being utilized currently? Because there's been a lot of changes as well in the business advancement team in other areas where this is different. I know, Mr. Fossman was in this role, right, and it was 50% split between White Oak and the Pike District.
Right, when the administration started, because of turnover and a sense of action not occurring at White Oak, that we wound up with Mr. Fossman doing both White Flint and White Oak. We now have Cicero DeSales, Salas, sorry, and he is working just on White Oak and East County. So we have tried to broaden his perspective of working with the whole East County, and helping the business community and other developments that are occurring in that zone. So, and that there was the sense of some of these administrative positions that are being supported out of the capital budget should be better spent. That money from the capital budget should go for capital activities, and that because he's doing more business assistance and leadership, having it continue to come out of the capital budget, finance recommended that we push it all together and be funded out of the operating budget. And of course, it has traditionally been within the office of the county executive.
And the role is less of a master plan ombudsman, which is what it originally was, and more of just a broader liaison to development.
I'm
opportunities
getting
in the private
exasperation from behind me, so I am saying something wrong. So
Giroux, welcome.
Is going to come to the
table.
Good afternoon, Giroux Bandit, Director of the East County Regional Office. Yes, the position as of the last 2-3 years has expanded tremendously, given that we've had a large number of developments really start off from the Hillandale area, starting with the Hillandale Gateway program, the park expansion in Hillandale, the redevelopment around the greater White Oak commercial area, which is a multi-approach tone to really changing the conditions in that area, to the Tech Road, the White Oak Town Center, the development process for the Montgomery College expansion through their community center in Broad Birch, across from it, we just opened up the Tesla Center, and then the White Oak Town Center, which we are getting ready to do the groundbreaking. We start also talking about the transportation, which is the second phase of the BRT along US 29, the redevelopment in Bordensville. So within the last 2 years, we've seen the functionalities of that position to really help development advance. It is very, very critical for us to have that position as the intermediary between the developers, planning department, and county departments such as the Department of Permitting Services, Department of Environmental Protection, as well as working with all those developers in our area in a cohesive way where they're really part of the conversation, the communication, the community engagement to really push those developments forward. So that's the major function of that position, which I think we're beginning to see the benefits of his efforts.
Appreciate that. I'll just note, I appreciate all of that, all the work that is happening. I think as the other conversation that we have been pushing for, that I have been talking about for a couple of years, about making sure that we're rethinking the regional service centers and determining what makes sense for each community and whether or not this model is working the way that it was intended, and thinking through what the next 10 or 20 years looks like, thinking through whether this position makes more sense in the regional service center or not. I think,
Actually, the position answers to the regional director. The office is right next to mine. We basically have weekly meetings, and we share the same line of communication with the development community, the businesses. I think that model is working extremely well. Now that we also have a more streamlined relationship with the business team, we will continue to further our relationship through those efforts to really broaden our outreach to the business community. We have a program manager, then that allows us to expand in terms of our broader community engagement. So the model is really going back to the original function of the regional office, using those resources where in the past it was like a one-person show. But I do think the county executive has been very supportive of that model, and I could see very similar ones from the other regional offices.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that Mr. Bende is my, under other duties, is assigned as my personal food consultant of Montgomery County, and he knows I'm a huge fan of his. But I'm just wondering, so if this position reports to the regional director, shouldn't it be in the community engagement cluster and not in CEX? Am I missing something?
I just think for legacy reasons, that's where the Leggett administration created it, and it has stayed there. We have repurposed it with the current incumbent, created different expectations, broadened its role. That's why we thought it would be better there. Happy to have a conversation about, we can do that administratively and move that position if need be there. But I think there's a strong, we don't want to send an inadvertent message of we are changing our focus on and commitment to White Oak and the East County by taking that position sort of out of the office of the county executive.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And maybe it's a distinction without much of a difference, and we don't need to belabor it here, but I do think it requires some follow-up, because there have been consistent conversations about staffing of the regional service centers, and you've actually done that here, but the budget doesn't reflect that, and I do think the budget and the org chart should reflect what they are, and in this case, this position doesn't report to an assistant CAO or to the deputy CAO or to the CAO. It reports to the regional director, and I think it makes sense for it to reflect that in the budget.
Because as you know, when we had the confluence of a number of the regional services directors leave, Jay Rue has been here for a very long time. He is a valued member of the leadership team of the county. So he is not just a regional services director, but he is a special advisor to the county executive. He helps coordinate our workforce development programs. So, he has a tremendous resume. He plays a different role within the administration because of his background and his assignments. So while, yes, he is in a regional services director position, he does play an additional special role to his credit, willing to take on that responsibility within the administration.
I appreciate we have a long meeting. The real impact is moving it from the capital budget to the operating budget, which I think makes sense given the span of control. I think this could get some further look, but it doesn't have to be today.
Mm-hmm.
You're fine? All right, good. And my apologies, Ms. Jung, I know you put together an excellent packet. I didn't know if did we miss anything? Was there anything else you wanted to highlight?
No, and thank you so much for CX staff for covering everything so in detail. There's nothing really left except for CX has a rating of 3 on the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice scoring mechanism, so they did pretty good there.
Great, wonderful. And again, thank you for a terrific packet and all of your work during this busy time. And I think for you all, some of you are staying because we're going to discuss quickly OPEB, correct? And I think Mr. Howard is coming down for that. We are. Sorry, Mr. Howard, do you want to walk us through this?
Sure. So today we have 2 compensation and benefit follow-up items to discuss. The first one, as you mentioned, relates to the OPEB funding policy, and the second one is related to the executive and legislative branch non-merit salary schedules. So first we'll go through the OPEB funding policy piece, and I'll stop for questions and discussion, and after that's finished, we'll move on to the salary schedule piece. So in terms of the OPEB funding policy, on March 2nd, the committee met and we had a lengthy discussion on OPEB funding policy options in conjunction with county's actuarial advisor, Bolton Partners, and then the executive branch staff, who are all here again today. At that session, the committee did support several elements of an updated policy, but asked for some further work and analysis on a couple elements, one being investment rate of return and another being some of the internal policy mechanisms that would be involved in creating a full-scale updated policy. In terms of the investment rates of return, at the March 2nd work session, council staff had proposed using a 6.5% investment rate of return. And since that time, the investment advisor for the Consolidated Retiree Health Benefit Trust board has updated their projections of returns over the next 10 years, and staff is now comfortable recommending a 7.5% as the long-term rate of return assumption for the trust. So that would be an increase from the prior recommendation. As we discussed in March, the investment rate of return assumption does have a big impact on funding, both in terms of pre-funding and what you can assume to pay out in the out years. And so based on the December 2021 analysis that Bolton had prepared, using a 7.5 investment rate of return assumption would require, in a new policy, potential new policy, would require an additional pre-funding in year 1 of $3.5 million, which is much less than the $20 million we had discussed on March 2nd. The other element was I'm calling the other policy mechanisms. And the staff working group has had further discussions on some of these internal mechanisms, which include smoothing, risk and funding tolerance, both before and after a target funding ratio is achieved, guardrails for investment performance that is significantly above or below the assumed rate of return, and other things like that. Staff does believe that work to adequately review and assess these internal policy mechanisms will need to extend beyond the council budget review period, as there's lots of moving pieces and we need to make sure we understand everything correctly. And Bolton Partners in our discussions with the staff working group has confirmed that from their perspective that going through some of these different internal mechanisms and understanding the implications of those is important before adopting a final policy. So to ensure that we have continue to move towards adoption of a final policy in a timely manner, and ensure that resources might be available in FY24 to provide any pre-funding that might be required based on a policy, Council staff suggests that the committee recommend that the Council adopt 2 provisions as part of the FY24 budget resolution. The first provision would be to require the executive to submit to the Council no later than October 1st a draft OPEB funding policy developed in collaboration with Council staff and the county's actuarial advisors, and it would be based on the following elements that the committee had previously supported: closed amortization, 85% funded ratio target, maximum 15-year time frame to reach the target funded ratio, and then the new element of the 7.5% investment rate of return assumption. Noting that the draft policy may need to include options for decision points on different policy components that the committee and the Council would have to take up. And also the alternatives that allow the county to achieve the 85% target funded ratio sooner than 15 years should also be considered. The second piece of the budget resolution language would be to indicate the Council's intent to utilize at least $3.5 million in FEMA reimbursement funds, assuming those funds are actually received by the county, in FY24 for additional OPEB pre-funding based on whatever the final funding policy would call for. Obviously, any additional OPEB pre-funding would have to be appropriated by the Council. This resolution language would not do that. It would just be a statement of intent for the Council that that's what it would like to do. And would also note that using one-time FEMA reimbursement for OPEB pre-funding is consistent with the county's fiscal policies, which state that using one-time revenue for OPEB pre-funding is actually a priority use for that revenue if unfunded liabilities exist, which is still the case. And so with that, I will turn it back to the committee for any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Howard. I fully endorse the proposed next steps and see if my colleagues have anything to add. No? I think Council Vice President Friedson, you good?
No. Thanks for the additional work. I
Yeah.
fully agree with next steps as well. I think there are a few wrinkles to work out, but I think we're headed in the right direction. I wish we were here sooner, as I know others feel the same way, but better late than never, and we're moving in a positive direction. Just really appreciate all the work that has occurred up to this point, and think we're headed in a positive path.
Great. All right. So on that, we're good. So quick conversation on OPEB. So we'll turn to executive and legislative branch non-merit salary schedules.
Great. So in 2016, the Council approved Bill 5115, which requires salary schedules to be developed for both executive and legislative branch non-merit appointees. These, for several reasons, this provision did not get fully implemented for both branches of government until last year, but we do have now both salary schedules for both non-merit employees on both sides. When the Council took up compensation and benefits previously, we did not have the executive's recommendation for the non-merit salary schedule yet for the executive branch, which we have now received. And so for the executive branch schedule, the executive recommends increasing the maximum and minimum of each grade by 6% for FY24 to reflect cost of living, which is similar to the other salary schedules for the other different types of positions in county government. This would be the first change to the executive branch schedule since FY22, as no increases were made to this schedule in FY23, even though other salary schedules were increased. One thing to note is decisions on actual pay enhancements for executive branch non-merit employees, appointees, are at the discretion of the executive. The only thing this does is just change the max and min of the scale. What someone actually receives does not change based on the action of approving the schedule. And then for the legislative branch schedule, this schedule applies to chiefs of staff in council member offices and the directors of the Office of Legislative Oversight and the county council offices and the hearing examiner. It does not apply to non-merit staff in council member offices, so I just want to make that clarification. So given the executive branch recommendation, council staff proposes a similar change to the legislative branch schedule to increase the maximum and minimum of each of the different ranges by 6% because the legislative branch schedule was created to be in alignment with the executive branch schedule. And so staff recommends approval of both these non-merit schedules as submitted by the executive and for the legislative branch as proposed by staff. Thank you.
I agree. Any objections? No, we're good on that. Thank you very much, Mr. Howard. Next, what are we coming back to? I can't remember. Yes, our Offices of Grants Management. Welcome back, Mr. Murphy. Great. Thank you all for coming back. We very much appreciate it. I know it's been a long week, but we appreciate the fact that you were able to fit into your schedules to split this into 2 sessions, given that there's a lot of movement with our grants, and just again want to express our deep appreciation for all the work that's going into this. We can kind of, I think there were a couple of things we wanted to pick up on. Ms. Chen, did you want to say anything before digging into the packet? You're good to go? All right, why don't we, there's a number of items, and I think the first item might be look at the addition of 2 new positions that are being requested. Here, I know, Mr. Murphy, you provided some updated information. If you want to just outline the 2 new positions and why they're needed in your department.
Great, thank you for the opportunity. So the 2 new positions are basically to fill a huge context of growth. I think a misconception with grants, just because historically the way the county has done it is we've had this small pool of funds, all the grant funds were concentrated there, or competed as one thing, and that's perfectly easy to manage. However, with creation of the Office of Grants Management, the intent was to extend this tool, this mechanism, throughout county government as a resource to be able to get money out to the nonprofit community, also get money out to the business community or even private individuals for certain purposes in a flexible, easier to use format. So in that context, where not only are community grants being revised to have a bit more separate pools of funding and different competitions for those, we're also looking at departments using their own base budget funds to create their own grants competitions, to put money out as grants, to compete them as grants. And so with this new tool available, departments are going to start using it. Just as things flow through, all procurement actions flow through the Office of Procurement, and they monitor those, make sure they comply with legality, best practices, all that. For grants, which is a separate tool from procurement actions, there's got to be an administrative office for those to flow through. And until the Office of Grants Management was created, that administrative function didn't exist. So a lot of my office and what we're doing is simply helping departments get their money out the door in a more flexible, easier to use way, mostly for nonprofits, but again, this can be used for the business community. This can be used for, during the pandemic, we gave money away to private individuals. It was very difficult because my office didn't exist. A lot of departments just simply had to create these things on their own. There was no one to really help them. They were reinventing the wheel. By having it go through my office and having staff who do this and nothing else, we can be faster, more efficient. We've got an online application platform that is tailored for grants and grants applications and award processes. So it's really, the expansion is really to deal with volume of the number of programs we expect to go. And I think even the list that I provided you of all these programs, this is the minimum. Already we're in discussions with a number of departments, because again, whether something goes out as a grant or procurement contract doesn't affect the budget. It's really kind of a choice of how the mechanism goes. But our department's saying, well, we've traditionally done this program as procurement action. It's never really worked. Procurement isn't really the right vehicle. If you have a grant now, we'd like to put this out as a grant, and your office would help us do that. So we're looking at looking at the number of grant agreements, just the legal agreements that we're going to have to be vetted through my office, we're looking at a 363%. So going from about 80 this year in FY23 to what I estimate to be about 370. A lot of those are going to be community grants, but most of those are going to be from other departments. So you look at the nonprofit security grants, which is an OEMHS. We're going to be helping them put those out and running their administrative process, helping them draft a grant agreement, vetting that, getting that approved and out there so the money can be used in a more effective way, because there has been a lot of difficulties with that programs. OEMHS has done the best they can with the tools that they have. We're providing them with new and better tools, and that'll go through our office. So the outgoing grants program manager 2 is just going to be double capacity for my existing program manager 2. Same job description, same role. It's just another person to handle a higher volume. So helping departments structure grant competitions, helping them run grant competitions, helping train departments how to actually manage grants. And that's when the thing, we have been calling things grants in the county for years, if not decades. If you go to any other jurisdiction, what we do is not grants, real grants. There's going to be a lot of training, a lot of development, and this is something the nonprofit community continuously flags, including yesterday on a call I had with one of them, where they were concerned about the transition of grants and said, hey, I know what a grant is. I get money from other people. I know how that works. I am really concerned about my contract monitor, or the person who's going to be my grant monitor. Do they understand how grants work? Because that's where my headache's going to be. I know you understand it, in the Office of Grants Management. How is that going to trickle down to the departments and the person I deal with on a day-to-day basis when I get my award from HHS or get my award from OEMS or Homeland Security? So this additional program manager is going to give us the capacity to work with those departments, help train them on this big transition, provide them with support, not just the competition and getting the grant agreement signed, but as you're monitoring it over the life of the award to make sure there's not more hiccups. So that's going to be very important. Also, as we look at ResJ integration, how are we going to make sure that grants are ResJ informed? This is huge in the nonprofit community. This is something that we just are going to need additional bandwidth. So again, helping departments be more ResJ informed in how they administer grants, but also making our processes more inclusive. So with some of the grants competitions we've had in FY23, we've had to, I spent at least 6 hours with one community member who's a member of our senior community, helping her upload a grant competition. She's very passionate about the scholarship. It's a volunteer-led organization. They're applying for money from the county to, help kids from underserved communities get into college. But our platform doesn't work for her, so we need to provide that extra service. We've had to provide that additional assistance for members of our disabled community to be able to apply because our platform doesn't work for them. It takes time and additional effort. We're happy to do that, but we need that capacity. And then we even had individuals from parts of the county that don't have good, or even within their homes, don't have good internet access, and our online application platform doesn't work for them. We have to take extra steps to be able to, get them to in there and get their application considered with everyone else. So part of inclusion and equity is going to having that additional capacity where we can help folks be more, be part of our processes and have their opportunities considered. So with the administrative specialists, this is a lot of grants, and doing a grant competition the right way is just logistically intensive, and any department who has done them, during the pandemic or afterwards, and Homeland Security can talk about this in great detail, it's just a very logistically intensive process. It doesn't require specialized knowledge. It doesn't require necessarily, well, parts of it do, but a lot of the logistics can be handled by, an administrative specialist. So providing support for each of the grants competitions, handling logistics, doing planning, document flow, monitoring our workflows that we're going to be setting up, our approval workflows, so that these get appropriately vetted, and also on our incoming grant side of the other half of OGM's role is going after more state and federal funds. So we have two great contract vehicles that we're going to be bringing up that all departments will be tapping into. That administrative capacity or specialists can help us quickly get these contracts, utilize these contract mechanisms to get lobbying support where needed, or to quickly hire contract grant writers so that we can quickly get that grant writer in, help our department, put together an A+ grant, maybe get us $1 million, $2 million, $3 million more of money for programs that don't have to be paid for by taxes. So it's just ramping up capacity to do what we're supposed to do.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. I think the council staff recommendation on this was a high priority. Do my colleagues have any questions? Council Vice President Friedson.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, I appreciate all of the discussion and description of what the positions are for and how they'll be used. One of my questions is whether the Office of Grants Management, in the way that you have described it, will be relieving some pressure that is currently on procurement and finance for countywide initiatives where the services provided to departments and to the departments themselves. Some of this is to get new money that wouldn't have otherwise been available to reach new organizations that weren't being reached before, and you described that, but you also described, at least what it sounded like to me, was significant support internally to help departments relieve the burden that is currently on them to do some of this work and to help procurement and finance in the areas that they have been participating in up to this point.
Yes. So in terms of the competition aspect, our job is to basically what I call process leadership. We take the process, we run it, we administer it for them, and departments provide policy leadership. They tell us what the policy is. We're not the experts in OGM. They tell us what, it should be. What should an abortion access grant program look like? What should it prioritize, or a business program, or a transportation program? We work with the departments to set the framework. After that, they're hands off. And we just run the logistics, we run the process, we do the information session, we collect the applications, we do some analysis. They choose who's on the review committee. We facilitate those discussions, schedule it. So we basically take the logistical burden off of departments who have been doing it themselves. And so, again, if I can use Homeland Security as an example, because we had a recent conversation with them, where they were just drowning in the administrative workload related to administering the nonprofit security grants. A lot of that we're going to be taking off of them. And even we have some tools and platforms that can manage the data and the applications much quicker and faster than they can do on their own using, TEBS build mechanisms. And TEBS did a great job during the pandemic of setting up these grants programs, on the fly within their platforms. But we have a contract tool that we bought, or we have a license to, that can do all of that very quickly and efficiently. In terms of taking workload off of finance, it's just going to flow through finance in a different way. The approvals will still flow through them. So I don't know if it's going to be that different there. But if you look at procurement, these are all things that the county wants to do. And we've had to put them out as procurement actions. So what's going to happen is, instead of going down procurement, they're going to go down the grants route. And we've established a delineation of what should go grants, what should go procurement, and departments will use that. And so that'll take a lot off of procurement's back, because we would be doing these things anyways, and they would have to flow through procurement. And that gets to the fundamental problem. A lot of these types of awards, they're not really procurement actions. We're not really procuring anything. We're just giving money for a public good. And so, again, the metaphor I use is we've been shoving a square peg through a round hole for years. And this has been painful for procurement, it's painful for departments, it's been painful for our nonprofit partners. Now we've got a square peg, we've got a square hole over here for the grants to go through, and a round hole over here for for procurement actions to go through. So that will take a significant lift off of procurement, because a lot of these awards that have flowed through them are just not going to be going through them anymore.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So I absolutely think that the grants program manager is necessary in order to lift up this office and do what it is doing. I'm a little less certain about the administrative specialist. There are smaller offices, much smaller offices, that don't have an administrative specialist at all. In the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, many offices that, for instance, have thousands and thousands of requests, a lot more than this office is going to have, do not have an administrative specialist. I'm just wondering, I would put these as different levels of priority personally. I think that certainly the outgoing grants program manager too is a high priority. Administrative specialist, we have 1,500 vacancies in county government. I would have preferred to see that come from a vacancy personally. So I'd see that more as a priority and think there are other ways to do it, but I will yield to colleagues on what they prefer.
Thank you very much. Mr. Murphy, I just wanted to say that I really do appreciate this additional conversation today. I really do. And it was interesting, as you know, I made a statement, I guess it was this week, I don't know, last week, whenever you were here, Mr. Murphy, how concerned I am about how we're treating our nonprofit partners and what it's meant, and we need to keep them in business. They do our business and do a good job doing it. And I got to tell you, I did hear from some nonprofits that said that that they too were concerned. But I also heard from representatives that said that they're happy. And I don't know whether the term happy, but they're understanding of how we're trying to get to a better place, and it's because of you and your office that's trying to get us there. And I want to say that I sincerely appreciate that. I think we all want to head in the right direction. The question is how we get there and how fast we can get there. And based on that, I'm fine to give you the resources is a high priority so that you can get there as quickly as possible. That's where I am.
So for keeping both positions a high priority. You know, I think as we're transitioning and doing all these, I think maybe splitting these up, high priority for the program manager and priority for the administrative assistant, administrative specialist, moving forward for the full council would be a good conversation to have. So, but really appreciate the additional information and all the work that you're doing. So we'll move forward with that. And then the second item, why don't we take up on the looking at the community grants NDA and how we're shifting the contracts. I know, Mr. Murphy, that you provided us with additional information, and I'm going to say this to make sure I understand it, if that's okay with you. So folks are going to reapply, and they'll find out in July whether or not some of them have been moved to departments. Those folks who haven't been moved to departments and need to reapply, they'll find out by July. The current plan is to give those who do not receive a grant a bridge to October. That's what's in our current, the current proposal, correct?
It would give everyone who's not moving to the base budget a bridge.
Okay.
So not just the people who were able to reapply and re-win funds, but also the people who, the people who apply and re-win funds, they'll have that bridge. But so will the people who reapply and don't win funds, they'll have that that extra space to wind down their programs if they know that they're not going to get it by October 1.
Okay. And then, but some people will start a new grant October 1.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Okay. After considering all this and thinking about, as the conversation we had earlier in the week about, you know, just generally how long usually nonprofits get to have to kind of tie off grants or understand, and knowing that telling somebody in July that they have until October is a difficult time of year, and that many of the grantees, whether or not they're working in schools or they're doing something that is related to the school calendar. And I know that you have looked at how much you would estimate, and I understand the numbers aren't always easy to figure out at this point, how much in addition it would be to have this go through the end of the year, till the end of December. How much more money are we talking about?
So I ran those numbers. Apologies. I ran those numbers just to have it for you. So there's $1,168,833 for a bridge in FY24, and in the CE's recommended FY24 budget, and that gets us to October 1. To do 6 months, you'd have to have $2,899,942 to get you to December 30th. So all the new grants would renew. All the new grants would start on January 1. So basically, on top of the county executive's recommended budget, you would need an extra $1,731,109. So the reason that it's not like a clear doubling is because every month you extend it, additional programs that wouldn't have been impacted, because you wouldn't need a bridge if your program gets renewed in November. Now, if we're extending it to December, now you need that bridge of November, December. So that's why it kind of exponentiates, and it's more than a clean doubling. But that's looking at every single program. And I just want to note that that includes the 3% inflationary increase for nonprofits from over their FY23 level. So their FY24 bridge would have that inflationary increase. If the council, I'm not sure where it is, I know it's been discussed about increasing the inflationary adjustment, I would have to go back to these numbers. It's not that hard. I could adjust that and tell you if it's a 6% increase, a 5% inflationary increase, what that would do to this total.
And if we did decide to then move that, instead of the grant cycle then beginning in October, we would move it to January.
Yes, I would still want to do the competition. I mean, we can start setting up the competition right now, like within our application platform, get the IT ready, and then whatever is decided upon in terms of the pools of money and the priorities and whatnot, that's easy for us to slot in. almost immediately after the appropriation is made, you pass your final approved budget, we can open that up for applications and people can begin to apply. Give at least 4 weeks, 6 weeks is better. Get those in, have a review committee set up right away, get decisions out the door as quickly as possible. I would still want to get decisions as quickly as reasonably possible, not overburden nonprofits with too quick of a cycle. But I think that's going to be a healthy thing, is getting those decisions, giving people as much lead time as possible if their awards are not going to be renewed, and then January 1st when the new cycle comes. That would be good too, because the historical problem we've had is when we started things on the fiscal year, it made summer programs impossible,
Really hard.
or you would have to apply for a community grant 2 years in advance. So at least by staying away from the summer period when these things start and stop, we can now enable or create more opportunities for organizations who are focused on summer programs to start doing some of that work.
Great. Council Vice President Friedson.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the work that has gone in the interim. I think this has helped to clarify things quite a bit, which has been very helpful. It took us only 4 years and an extra week, but I think we're getting there. Okay. All right. So I appreciate the bridge. I think, if anything, the bridge is too short, even as it is, even as proposed. And so I guess what I'm trying to understand, and I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, because it's more clear now, but I'm still not crystal clear. If we did the process as we did, but just started the new grants later, and so funded the existing grants for longer, through December 31st, for instance, and then said the new grants are going to start on January 1, even if you found out in August, why does that cost more money? I mean, is it because some of the contracts end much earlier than that, and so they would then be left in the lurch? Like, are contracts ending, are not all contracts ending at the date that we do the cutoff? Is that the issue?
Yeah, so a lot of...
It's an annual contract, and so it could have started in August, or it could have started in July, or it could have started in October. And so at that point, if you're getting funded through the year, is that the issue?
Yes. So your organizations are getting funded on a 12-month basis, like a maximum 12-month basis. So, and it can be shorter than that. So they don't all renew on June 30th or July 1st. So I can get you the numbers of each month and how many, but the ones I do know off the top of my head is with October 1, if you stop things, the ones impacted by September, August, and July, those total 122 programs. So, and there's 150 programs that the CES proposed, being recompeted. So there's about 28 programs that there's no need for a bridge, because their contract, would renew in November or December anyways, or some of them even in January. So we wouldn't provide a bridge for them because they don't need it. They're going to have that. They're already going to have that lead time built in. So that doesn't cost us money to do that. But when you extend that time period, not only are you paying more months for the existing programs, now you're adding more programs on top of it.
So that's what I suspected. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, I still have concern about the gap timeline, because I think this is an aggressive timeline to pull off, and I'm concerned about that to begin with, notwithstanding how terrific you have been. You still are not staffed up with your extra person, and there's a lot of things to do here, including the folks who are watching now don't know the answer to these questions yet, and won't know until after Memorial Day, presumably at the earliest, and so they're going to have to start preparing for that. Won't know the answer until soon thereafter. Couldn't we just take the money out? Couldn't we keep the same amount of money? There's two pots of money. There's the bridge funding money, and then there's the rebid money. And presumably, the rebid money, if there's less time left in the fiscal year, if you have 9 months of fiscal year or 6 months of fiscal year, the amount of money that would be required, even to do the same level of services for those people, for those organizations, would presumably at least proportionally decrease, right? So then you would be able to bake in, if you knew in January 1 how much you had from contracts that had already been signed that you know are going to renew, that we have to pay, we have to pay this year's grantees for the portion of next year that the 1-year contract covers. That's baked in. Like we know we owe that. Plus you're then going to have the amount of money that you're going to recommend for additional new contracts throughout the course of the year. But the number for this fiscal year will be proportionally less. So why wouldn't we just take the 1.7 million out of the new awards, because presumably you will need less money for 6 months than you would have for 9 months, even to honor the same services with the same nonprofits. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But then you're getting us back onto the old cycle again. If those programs are only going to last for 6 months, then... No,
I'm not saying that. Sorry. I think we got to get out of this idea. We're not getting on the old cycle.
Exactly.
They're going to be a 1-year contract, but the money that we are appropriating ends June 30th, regardless of your cycle. Your cycle is irrelevant to our budget process in terms of timing, because we only are budgeting for a fiscal year, period, full stop. Now, next year, that would, increase, to whatever that amount is going to be, potentially the amount of money that you're going to need to request next year, which I understand. But that would provide a bridge without creating an additional problem. We're forward funding. I mean, if we delay the time of a nonprofit to start, we would be forward funding the back end of their contract, which would be extended outside the fiscal year, which doesn't really align with our budget process. So we could just change the timing. It would reduce the amount of money, but also reduce the amount of time that the money would be needed for this fiscal year, and then we would catch up to your process. So next year, you're going to have to apply, regardless of whether you start in October or January 1st. You're starting mid-fiscal year with annual contracts, starting them, and then presumably on a rolling basis, you'll have others. You are going to start with the understanding of exactly how many contracts you have to pay, regardless of any new decision you make, to pay for the previous decisions you have already made. Because you're going to owe, you have to honor the year contract for a certain number of months in fiscal year 25 for decisions that you're going to make in fiscal year 24. We're not appropriating the funds for that now, are we? Or is the idea that you think we are appropriating those funds now?
I'm not sure if I fully capture it, so let me summarize what I think you're saying, is that we would extend the awards to the existing FY23 awards that aren't going into base budget. We would extend those, say, to December 30th. Then with the FY24 appropriation, we would pay for the remaining 6 months within this budget. Then what we would do is we would not have a competitive process that next summer for the remainder of that award, but rather they would automatically get a new grant agreement during the summer that would automatically extend them, and then there would be a competitive process.
No. I think you're missing. So stick with your exact same process that's happening now.
Yeah.
Like, this is not impacting you at all, besides the time at which you are starting your new process. Everything else is exactly the same as you have proposed. I am not trying to interfere with years-long work that you have set up this new process. I agree with you, and I'm with you. We have other things to work out on details, but on the high level, I agree with you, okay? What I am saying is that if you're assuming that the money is static, and that regardless of whether it's 9 months of providing funding for a nonprofit to go through the end of the fiscal year, or 6 months, that money would be the same. And what I am suggesting is that's not really how it works, right? They would be getting a prorated amount on an annualized basis of the contract. So just to give an example, if a nonprofit is getting a $10,000 award, a 9-month, they would be getting paid $7,500 in this budget. If we delayed it to January 1st, the same $10,000 contract, we would only encumber $5,000 this fiscal year. And so what would happen? You would have to request as part of your budget the $5,000 to honor the contracts that have already been given, and then a projection of the new contracts through the new grants that you're going to want for fiscal year 25. The gap in that number, from my perspective, is the money that will cover the 3-month difference. So we shouldn't need to add new money here because we're just delaying the inevitable. Does that make sense?
But yes, but I think we're not necessarily talking about the same number of organizations because, right? I think if I understand what you're talking about, though, we're going to have fewer organizations moving. No. I'm not sure I understand what you're doing. Sorry, Councilor.
You know, we've managed to take a confusing concern. Yeah, but I understand what we're attempting to say here. So when someone comes in for a contract, they get a year contract. Do you fund the entire year in this fiscal year? How does that work? If that, rather than $10,000, I'm a simple guy. Let's say that contract was $12,000 so it's $1,000 a month. Do you figure that $1,000 a month is for the entire contract, or do you figure in this budget, or do you figure the $12,000 is 6 months, $6,000 in this fiscal year, and that you have to immediately fund it for the next fiscal year? How does that work?
In terms of the appropriation,
Yeah.
we would get a $12,000 appropriation for this program. And it would, if it starts on January 1st,
Yep.
it would fund a full calendar year. So we would have to encumber those funds before the fiscal year ends. But as long as the funds are encumbered, that money, that FY24 appropriation would continue to fund even as we go into FY25.
So you've already encumbered under FY24
Yes.
for the entire. See, that's where the confusion is, I think. And I do appreciate, first off, I do appreciate trying. My concern is if we can do the bridge, and as far as we can do, in some cases you're telling somebody you got to go out of business. I mean, or you got to go out looking for new business from some other resource than us.
Mm-hmm.
And they need time to figure that out. I don't know, the 3 months to do a going out of business sale works for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think the bridge works. I appreciate what the Vice President is saying, but I believe that we should have at least the 6 months bridge, is what I think.
Ms. Chen, did you want to jump in?
The question on this bridge funding is also a question on, it's really the contract of, is this actually fiscal year 24 newly appropriated money that should be used for extension of a fiscal year 23 contract? So I think that's where we're getting mixed up. But I think the timing of it is, if you it's the same thing of when we were hiring the director of Office of Grants Management position. It was a supplemental of previous year funds to start the process. So what we're doing right now is extending fiscal year 23 service contracts 3 or 6 months. So the question would be, is that fiscal year 23 money, or is that new money for fiscal year 24?
But you're saying that it would be this, once it's encumbered, it's in that year's budget, right?
Yeah, the request for the bridge fund is in the FY24 request. So we would, as soon as you hit the appropriation, or even before that, we would, we already have a grant agreement template in place to facilitate these. We would start work, just as what's being done right now with all the procurement contracts are expected to be renewed. We would start working with the partners to get the data that we need, the information that we need. We would start cycling these out. So as soon as you guys approve the FY24 budget, assuming this money's in there, whether it's 3 months or 6 months, that's easy to update. We would have something signed so that when July 1 hits, and we would prioritize the ones whose contracts are ending June 30th, make sure those are signed first. We would get those in place, and we can't sign anything till the appropriation is made, but we would just get those signed so that as soon as June 30th ends, the procurement contract ends, July 1, their grant agreement, because it's going to be a different legal agreement, it's going to look very, very different, is going to begin, and so they would just jump off of that. But because it's going to be a different award, you would have to do, or it'd be more complicated to try to.
Can't be more
Right, 'cause
complicated.
no, but
We've got as complicated as
so for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
whether or not they're being continuing or they're getting the bridge, whether we say October or December, on July 1, they're signing something new.
Yes. But actually, before then, we would want them to sign something new.
Before that. So then it is FY24 money. We're not, okay. And so what I know Council Vice President Friedson has another question. I would say that it seems to me that the will of this committee is to provide a bridge, and I think where we're going is December, end of December sounds better than October, and what we're trying to figure out is, does that necessitate additional funds, or is there a way that it gets backfilled, as Council Vice President Friedson was talking about? And I'm not sure here is where we're going to figure out that, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's two things. I guess my preference, I have concern that if we put 1.7 or $2 million on the reconciliation list, that it ain't making it. And we have disrupted these organizations enough. We have given conflicting information enough. Everybody's best intentions here. I'm not being accusatory or anything, but despite all of our best efforts, it's very challenging to untangle this web. And we have not done a very good job of it collectively, and it has caused a lot of consternation and confusion. And I think our interest, and I think it's shared, is to try to mitigate the further disruption that this causes to the greatest extent possible. So, so two things. One, is this a non-lapsing NDA?
I believe it is.
It's non-lapsing. So the funds that go in. Okay, so that's the answer to the question why you're saying I'm wrong, which is fine. It's not the first time. So I do think that it will reduce the amount of money that will be needed to add to the non-lapsing NDA next year, and so the funding will be offset personally, because the amount of money that you would need for additional funds would be less, because some of it will already have been encumbered, and just by delaying the process, that doesn't add new money, it just delays the start times. So but I understand the point from a fiscal standpoint of needing to account for that properly. I certainly understand that better than I'd like. My personal view is option one is that the gap funding gets funded, and that we advocate for that. But option two would be that we set the determination that it's gap funding through December 31st on your same timeline to let people know, as you've stated here, but the gap funding gets extended from October to December 31st, because it doesn't help anything if we delay the timeline for when they find out. So I just want to make that very clear. And if it doesn't get funded, that the amount, in order to maintain that timeline so we don't disrupt further, is to come out of the new awards, at least for those 6 months, and then we can make up for it 6 months later in the new budget, because you're going to be on a new cycle. Because to me, the two most important things that we can do is finally rip this Band-Aid off and get this process going, number one, and number two, and not in this order, to make sure that we're not adding disruption and challenge to this issue. And so I think we can fix the issue with more funding next year to offset, but that we shouldn't, if the money doesn't get funded in this budget, it shouldn't change the timeline to meet the funding. We should keep the timeline, and we should offset the funding to make the timeline work. And if that means we have a nominally less amount of money for the 6 months to start, we can catch up for it next year, and I think that's a much better and more reasonable outcome. And so I think that's reflective of what it sounds like.
If I can add to that, I mean, if you look at the community grants NDA, it's budget neutral from FY23 to FY24. And so for us to find the bridge funds, that's exactly what we did. That's what we did within the C's recommended budget. So if you are going to take that out of the other things to make it budget neutral, which is what which I assume you're trying to propose, then yeah, that is in line with what the CE strategy was already. So And again, I want to emphasize the growth of grants programs throughout county government. There is going to be a huge number of opportunities directly from departments for nonprofits to apply for these other more targeted grant programs that are coming directly from departments. So again, I think you're going to see a growth in grants. It's not just going to be this particular pool of funds, but this is the tear the Band-Aid off year. The challenge is transitioning from an old process to a new one. Once we get on this new cycle, we'll have a competition every summer. As soon as you guys do the appropriation, awards will go active on January. They can count on their money going through to December 31st every year. It's going to be, that'll be the new cycle. And the important thing is just getting to that new cycle will be painful this year, but the bridge funding, and the bridge funding is also one-time money. Next year, you will not need a bridge fund because everything is going to be out. You can recycle that back into the NDA for more of these programs. You can put it in other places. There's that is going to be
that was also more or less my point. If it's a and I didn't want to go. We don't need to go too far into this, but in a non-lapsing fund like this, the new money is the new money, and the way that we budget, we just look at ads. Now, should we be budgeting like that? Are there ways to change it? There certainly have been proposals before, but this is the way. If you look at every packet we've seen so far, it's here's what it was last year, here's what it's changing, it went up or it went down. And so that is the area, the bridge funding, of where regardless, the change in the amount of time will impact what we're going to have to add or not add next year. So I believe it will all come out in the wash. We're going to have to commit to this, and we're going to know what it is, but the most important is that we set the timeline, that stay the timeline, and we communicate the heck out of it. I just want to make sure that if the funding doesn't come through, because personally, the 3% discretionary increases are competing now, if we do this, directly against this bridge funding, and I am concerned that this isn't going to make it, and what I just want to make sure is regardless of what we do, we will try to add more bridge funding, but the most important thing is that the funding stay what it is, the deadline, the timeline stay what it is, and that if we need to, the money come out of the new awards for that short 6-month window, and that we can work through this improved process and the funding necessary to execute it next year.
Mr. Morris, you have a question?
Yeah, can I just ask a clarifying question? So just for, as an example, a contract that's going to get signed January 1, is the idea that that contract term would go through the end of FY24 or would be for the entire a whole year?
It'd be an annual contract. We're not trying to change your process at all. All we're saying is that whenever it starts, because some won't start on January 1. We know that they're going to end on December 31st for the bridge funding, but most will start January 1, but some, you may have a rolling basis and there may be another timeline, I would assume, right?
I think we'd want to stay away from that, at least for this pool of funding. I think it would be better to keep everyone on the same timeline, because then we're just going to catch up.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, some awards are going to catch up to this, where for 3 or 4 awards, they've fallen off the cycle, and now we're doing that. But that gives us 6 months, and even that's where I gasped a little bit when he said sign on January 1. No, we would do the competition in the summer.
Right.
We would get those awards set. We would get those awards signed. So say August at latest. Everyone would know how much, whether they've got money, they know exactly what the money looks like, they can start preparing. And again, I'm basing all of this on my federal experience as a nonprofit getting grants and as a person in the federal government giving grants. We would project this way ahead of time, use fiscal year funds very, very late in the fiscal year, always get it encumbered, of course, before the end. But that gave us huge amounts of lead times and predictability as an organization, and as a funder as well, huge amounts of predictability.
Well, I know this is a federal town, but I don't think most people think of the year starting in October. So it's all the more reason I think that starting January, if you're starting them all on the same timeline, even more reason from my perspective, it's easier to communicate December 31st and January 1 as end of the year. We have a fiscal year, and then your grant year is going to go to December 31
And we would sign our awards in spring, so we would have that kind of 6-month. We knew in the spring that was kind of our budget season as a nonprofit, because that's when the money's trickling down from the appropriation for folks to actually start implementing and putting out the grants programs.
With or without the new dollars, which we will have time because of the later start to address next budget year, you can stay on this timeline with or without the dollars. I think we should try to get the dollars, but I think it's going to be tough to do everything, and I just want to make clear that if it doesn't get through the budget, that this timeline stays and that we're going to have the conversation of what the funding is going to need to be to make up for it next year as we figure it out.
Yeah, I agree the prioritization should be getting on the new timeline. That is going to be, again, the limited disruption. I mean, this is planned out for 5 years in the future of how it's going to work 5 years from now, 10 years from now, just to get away from this, again, historically very disruptive cycle, very difficult for the nonprofit community, very difficult for the government. It's not worked for anybody. Once we get on this new cycle, it's going to be much better.
Ms. Chen, did you want?
Just one clarification, it does not need to be now, but what we are doing is shifting also, if we're not, like the clarification of a reimbursement expense versus grant agreements for all of these, and the timing of when funds are hit versus submitting monthly invoices. So because that's changing every grant process in terms everybody is used to June 30th making sure that all your invoices are paid. So if we switch all this to grant agreement, then we don't have the problem of a 12-month change completely from for 30 years we've been doing June 30th, and now you have to get all your funds done by December 31st. Point of clarification.
And I think we've talked about doing a separate session, just focused on process, just focused on what the grant agreement looks like. There's not really a budget impact to that, but what the form of the money and how it's being given out, again, this is what the nonprofit community has been more interested in than total funding amounts. It's like, what is this money going to look like? How am I going to do it? Is this going to be like the Fed grant I get? Again, even yesterday, a conversation I had with a nonprofit, they said that their $15,000 grant from the county is more work to administer than their $150,000 grant that they get from the federal government. And federal government grants are hard to administer. That says something about our processes and how this works. It's just not the right tool for the job. If it's a real procurement action, that's a real tool for the job. For these types of programs, it's not. So I look forward to that future discussion and looking at how these things are going to work and how we're, in line by line, how we're addressing the needs and wants in the nonprofit community by having this new agreement.
Great. Well, I think on the reconciliation list, we will put as a high priority the additional funds to extend this to December, but understanding that this is what the committee would like to see happen. And Mr. Murphy, I just say again, thank you so much and for bringing your expertise to this. I can't think of someone better to be the director of this and to take us through this very challenging time at this moment. So for some reason, my computer I just lost everything. All right, so I think we're good on that piece. And then the final piece, I believe, in this was the cost sharing and the matching grants. And so I know this is a tricky one because sometimes we don't know what's going to happen in Annapolis. This year, our state delegation did an amazing job in bringing back resources for Montgomery County, and I know you've been looking at closely. We have $3 million for this, looking at what has been requested already for matching funds, and then I know we've discussed the fact that some people didn't realize because it's kind of a confusing process with the bond bills in Annapolis and everything. And now they're wondering, can I get matching funds now that they received money from the state? And so can you tell us a little bit, as you've been looking at this, what the $3 million will cover, the people who have already requested money, and can we put in place a process for folks who may have received state funds but have yet to request a matching?
And again, just to repeat what you just said, I mean, our delegation really delivered this year. They really got us an unusually high amount of money. Looking at it and kind of economic trends, might not expect this volume in future years. But it was more than we expected when we developed the budget for the matching funds. We thought it would be, or at least I thought, in terms of recommending this would be more than enough, and we would have change. And that's in the budget book, to have a competitive process with whatever's left over, and the folks who would win from the competition would go next year to the delegation and say, hey, Montgomery County's already given me money, can you match me with state money? That's not been the case. They did such a good job. We have more money than I think we can match. when they filled out these applications, and that was in the fall, you know, things were quite different. Even some of the things that we are funding through other parts of the budget, the numbers have shifted considerably. So to try to make an evaluation over what you should or could match at this point, I think is going to be incredibly difficult, and I'm not sure how that can be done effectively. There were three or four organizations that did indicate that they were going to seek county funds. They totaled $560,000. They're what they indicated. Those needs could have increased. Those needs could have decreased. There's a number, based on the legislative mechanism that some of these bond bills were given. We actually don't know what some of these partners, what their needs might be from the county. It might be zero. It might be the state matching. But even just kind of a cursory analysis I did of if we're just equally matching what the state gave, if we're capping things out at $350,000, which is our normal annual, if it's a big ask, like $1 million or so, we would usually only give about $350,000 a year, $400,000 a year, because they're not going to spend all $1 million in 1 year. We can give that to somebody else who's going to use it immediately. So it was, for the non-arts, it would have been well over $3 million. For the arts organization, it's still like almost $1.5 million, and that's very estimates. That's why I'm giving you rough figures, but that's double what we put aside, what the CE put aside in the budget for just for state matching. And I want to note that $1 million in the CE's recommended budget is for small projects, for communities that might not be going after state bond bills, seeking $10,000, $15,000 to build an extra refrigerator or freezer for a food pantry, maybe just a small addition to a local museum, or upgrading like a playground or a park in some neighborhood. So those were never intended to be matched, because there's a scale of project that, and we talked about this in the last session, that it just doesn't fit the bond bill and what the intent of the bond bill process is. So we're really looking, at least with the CE's intent, we were really looking only at $2 million, $750,000 for arts projects and $1.25 million for non-arts projects. So how you match that with the bounty that's been provided by the delegation, I think will be difficult. What we could do is return to the traditional process, except again, we would have it after the appropriation. We could set up a grants program. We would collect applications. We could ask all the questions that we don't, for information that we don't have now, sort that out, look at everything. You could put whatever priorities you want on types of projects, service providers, in terms of how we prioritize the money. The more guidance you give me, my job is to make sure that whatever process happens is in line with whatever guidelines you, not guidelines, but what requirements that you set. So that would be, I think, a more effective way to address, more money than we can bond. And then what has traditionally happened, because this has happened in the past, again with the disjointed cycle, is if folks don't get matched this year, we could run another process the next year, and we could prioritize them to get that to get funding. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for looking into that. We appreciate it. I think I would agree with your recommendation on how we should proceed. I would leave the $3 million in the budget this year, and then as soon as we can, maybe schedule a session to come back and discuss this further.
Yeah, I agree. I appreciate it as soon as we can. I think would be great, and I appreciate your leadership on this, Madam Chair, and appreciate your thoughtful look into it. I do think we have told these partners that this money was going to be available. We didn't tell a specific organization that they were going to get a specific amount, but I wouldn't feel comfortable saying we're just going to start next year. I don't think that that's reasonable or appropriate, but we do need to set up a process that meets our equity goals, that addresses community needs, and that is transparent and accountable. And I think we need to better understand what that would look like. I will say a grants process that we can cover half of what we think the needs are is probably better than most in terms of our ability to help those who are requesting it. Of course, we'd always want to meet all of the needs, but I don't know of a scenario where we've ever been able to accomplish that. If we do, none of us would need to work as many days as we do, because our job would mostly be complete. But I do think this seems like a challenge, but not an insurmountable one, if we come back, work through it, and figure out a reasonable way based on a process, based on asking questions, based on better understanding what the needs are and where the different funding resources are to be able to move some of these forward.
And again, this gets back to the beginning of this discussion. The point of having a grants office is this is what we do, and this is the only thing we do. And we are all experienced. You know, my new or both of my new colleagues, but the one focused on outgoing grants, you know, comes to us from the city of Rockville, where she ran many of their grants programs. So we have an experienced staff. We've been doing this a lot. I've been doing this almost 20 years. So in some shape or form, whether on the receiving end or the giving end, and we can do this quickly, more efficiently, you know, take in that feedback, develop processes, know what the best practices are, know how to ask the question, structure it, so we can do that. We look forward to that discussion. Whatever priorities you give us, we'll implement them.
Yeah, my only question here is, cost sharing grants have been in the budget before, so how does the $3 million this year compare to the previous? I mean, before there were delineated amounts in the recommended budget that the council approved. There's only one or two instances where I think the council changed or moved or added funding where we, you know, largely took from the operating budget and put it in to this. But what was the previous amount?
On your previous packet, it was Circle 6. There's a chart up there looking at least going back to
I pay close attention, but I'm not that good. So,
okay. So, and that, yeah, I was just going to tell you where I'm getting my numbers.
Yes, thank you.
So it goes back to FY20. There were the cost sharing capital grants in FY20 was 1.65, almost 1.7 million. There was, again, this is when it was split between the council and the county executive, had two separate processes. 1.6 the next year, 500,000 FY22. That was when, again, the CE recommended match whatever the state gives us, which was the guidance, was how we intended to do this process. And then last year was 3 million, and this year's recommended 3 million. So this is
you answered my question there.
Yeah.
So I guess, I mean, this wouldn't go on the reconciliation list because it's level funding from last year.
Exactly.
So I just wanted to note that.
Yeah, no, I think
You were a more in-depth answer than I was expecting, which I shouldn't be surprised by given your thoroughness, which I appreciate. But that was the point that I wanted to make.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure we got this because the staff recommendation was to reduce the amount.
Right. So I just wanted, it's not on the reconciliation list, which if you weren't watching would have been confusing.
Exactly. We're keeping it in and
level funding.
Yes.
And then we'll figure out a process when we come back. Okay.
Exactly. It's the process that we need to figure out. Councilmember Katz, you good?
I'm good.
All right. I think we're good. Is there anything else, Ms. Chen?
I'm going to summarize.
Okay.
Okay, so item number 8, Office of Grants Management. The first Grants Manager 2 position is a high priority on the rec list, and the Administrative Services Coordinator position is a priority on the rec list. So we will have a work session next Friday for Office of Grants Management. Item number 9 is the Community Grants NDA. That is a high priority for the extra bridge funding to December, which is about 1.73 million, and we'll get a better number. And that's a high priority being put on the rec list. Okay, great. And then, so we will have a work session on that next Friday as well. And then for cost sharing, there's no, it's budget neutral, so it's not going to be on the rec list. Instead, if we can decide now, would be, I assume, consent calendar item for the same day. And also, we will schedule as early, I mean, I'll do June, but I'll do July too. But definitely by July. Usually when we had to reschedule follow-up sessions for grants, we were able to get the third week of July, so just putting that out there. So is that the understanding, and it's a 3-0 vote on all 3 of those items? All right, thank you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you very much for all your work this week. Very much appreciate it. The last item we have is a follow-up conversation with the Technology and Enterprise Business Solutions Department on their operating budget. I just want to say thank you also to TEBS for coming back this afternoon to follow up on a number of questions that the committee had based on the conversation we had earlier this week. Great. Dr. Terragas, I think we could just start maybe on page 4 with the additional questions on vacancies, if we want to, if you have
Sure.
something else you wanted to start with?
No, I just wanted to summarize that you have basically 4 different issues ahead of you. One is the vacancies and lapses in TEBS in general. The second one is the executive memo that came across with some specific impact on TEBS. The third one is the new web for 1.5 million. And the last one is an identity management item that was new, but perhaps we can discuss this a little bit more. So if you turn to page 7 of my previous memo, you'll see that you had 30 positions and 12 positions being discussed at that point on April 26th in your previous meeting. At that point, Mr. Friedson asked for some kind of a crosswalk between those positions, the 30 and the 12, and the current specific position by position status. That is on circle 28, and it's 3 pages of a chart. Perhaps that's where you want to pick up the conversation.
Great, just getting there. And I think we don't necessarily, pull it out back to bigger picture, right? And I think one of the questions is, it looks like there are 27 vacant positions right now, or as of a few days ago. I know this changes. 16 were in development, 11 in pre-development. And I think, at least I'll speak for myself, the ones that I was particularly interested in were the pre-development ones. As we, left our conversation earlier in the week, it was lots going on in TEBS, a lot reorganization, great work going on. And given this year and this year's budget and the number of vacant positions you're filling, is getting basically clarification on particularly these pre-development, these 11 pre-development positions, and in the overall picture of the number of vacancies you have, where are those going, and the likelihood that they would be filled in this in the upcoming fiscal year.
Hi, Allison Dollar, Chief Budget Officer for TEBS. We have, of the 27 positions, and I'll just reiterate, 16 are in pre-development, which we hope to start filling, recruiting, filling in FY24. And we have detail on the priority needs that these positions support. The 11 positions are vacant positions that we are looking on a case-by-case basis as needs arise in the department, like AI, for instance, contractor conversions. We really have limited flexibility. So essentially, we just have these 11 positions to work with, and also to meet our FY24 recommended lapse target, which we pretty much need these positions to achieve that as well. We were able to achieve our lapse in 23 and also in this current fiscal year, and also contribute or absorb positions from the cable fund because our lapse target was lower, and we did have retirements, unplanned retirements, and as I mentioned before, they've been here for long periods of time, so it was a tremendous savings for us, and so we were able to do that in 23. With this recommended lapse target for 24, it's going to be considerably challenging for us. One, to meet that lapse target, and not to mention potentially increasing it, we would halt hiring altogether in 24. So these 11 positions essentially are just positions that are vacant that we are reviewing as needs come up in the department, but right now the focus is the 16 positions, which we have greater detail on. I think Mr. Friedson wanted information on the 16 positions that we're moving forward with.
So what we've done is we've given all the detail, even as it relates to what initiatives these positions would be working on, both current and future initiatives. And that's the longer spreadsheet.
Yeah, great. So I get one question. Thank you for that clarification on the 16 and 11 positions. And I know one of the things that we have discussed and is the contract conversion.
Yes.
And, and the savings that would come as you are converting contracts to positions. Where, for this upcoming year, those contract conversions, are you seeing those in those 16 positions that are in development? Are they mostly falling in there?
We've identified 3 in the 16. 11, we have potential for several contract conversions because we have about 66 contractors throughout the department. So we are trying to, really address that. Just for your awareness too, historically, TEBS has had, or DTS, I should say, had significant unbudgeted contractor costs. And there was a structural imbalance between our personnel costs and our operating budget. So every year to address that, our operating needs, our contractor costs, we would do the county executive transfer max at 10% from our personnel costs to fund the operating budget. OMB has been on our necks about making sure that we fix that structural imbalance, and that is what we have been aggressively doing, by which reducing our contractors and or bringing them on as full-time equivalents. And for FY23, we did have to do a transfer, but it was at 4% instead of 10. So we are demonstrating that we are, gradually addressing that issue.
It is not a current management practice to work that way. No.
Great. Yeah. Council Vice President Friesen.
Yeah, I appreciate it. There are a lot of moving parts here, and we're trying to sort through it. And I just want to reiterate, as I said in the last meeting, as I've said directly, I really appreciate the management at the department, the changes that have been made. We are modernizing this department, and that work is really important. And I do believe that, and I think we all share in that goal. I think the question is, what's realistic about what can be accomplished in the next year in the context of a lot of other decisions that are being made? And my approach to every department has been in really scrutinizing to make sure that we're prioritizing number one, and number two, that we're setting ourselves up for success. Because I think oftentimes in several of the budget proposals that have been before us, despite the best efforts of really smart and talented and dedicated people within each department, we're trying to fix every legacy challenge that has faced us almost all at once. And I just find it very unlikely that even the most talented and the most dedicated people are capable of doing that. And so trying to find that right balance is not easy, but that's the intention. I'll let you respond to that.
I don't think that's been our practice or our history. I think that our strategies have been extremely thought through. I think that we work at the base level to understand, but I think part of it is that many of our initiatives come from other places. I'll give you an example. We have until December of this year to actually build an election system. The legacy election system is one that has been decommissioned, and that directive comes from what has to happen as it relates to the election process. So there are scenarios where the initiatives that come into the organization have a direct impact on things that can't change, the upgrade on the IGES system. I just don't believe that we're in a situation where we can't handle what we brought before you. And if there's any indication that that's the case, I would be happy to talk about it. But I think we're very strategic. We have a long list of legacy applications, as you know. ERP system of maybe 14 years old. So when I came on board, of course, we were kind of hit with COVID. And these things were on a list of initiatives going forward. So we have had time to prepare, to resource. I think that anything that would happen in regard to these positions, these vacancies, will put us in a position not to be able to deliver, not to be able to maintain the level of cybersecurity that has to happen in an organization of this size. And we've seen, I think Dr. Charegas brought an article up that, was it the city of Dallas that had, well, I just read today, where was a large school district. So there are quite a few demands on our organization that we can't move away. We can't say we're not doing it. So I really would want for you all to consider the kinds of services that we deliver, and the fact that many of those services and responsibilities are paramount to Montgomery County maintaining a reputation and also being safe as it relates to vulnerabilities.
Appreciate that. So just I'll move to high level here. There's two dynamics that you have raised. One is contractor conversion, which presumably is the idea that by going from a contractor in IT, which are very expensive, to full-time equivalents, that should save money. And number two is the idea that the way in which you meet laps is by having high levels of vacancies, that you basically, the 2.2 million in laps is equivalent to 17 IT type positions, and essentially you're meeting your laps target by having the vacancies. So I guess the question is, if the answer to your question was, listen, the 11 pre-development positions, we are not going to fill them because they're lapsed, and that's how we're going to meet the lapse target, then we're arguing over nothing here, because something would have to give. We'd either have to reduce your lapse target, or we would have to, eliminate the positions, or let you have the positions but keep the lapse. But it would be a distinction without a difference. But that's not really the response. And so this is what I'm trying to understand. Could you just speak to the two dynamics here of, one, contractor conversion specifically related to the 11 pre-development positions? Which of those are converting a contractor, and how much of those would immediately create a cost savings, and how much would that cost savings be, number one? And then number two, on the question specifically related to the lapse, how much of the lapse is being absorbed by the 11 pre-development positions being held open, and for how long, based on your projections, and how much is based on the other, 16 positions, and based on your expectation, given where you are in the process now, of what percentage of the year they're going to be filled in, right? Because if you're recruiting now, they're not going to start on July 1, all 16 of these positions, presumably. You have some timeline of when you would expect people to encumber these positions, and you're baking some lapse in. So could you speak to those two distinct, but I think somewhat related issues?
I can attempt. So we currently have a 2.2 lapse target, and then there was an additional 1.1 added in the CE recommended budget for like 3.3 million, correct? Yes. And so of the 16 positions that we want to fill in FY24, that we have it all, we're working on the fine tuning, the position descriptions, et cetera. That equates to about $2.2 million. The additional.
Sorry, can I just before we move on. So 2.2 million is directly tied to the timing at which you would fill the 16 positions? Because of the 1 or 2 or 3 months that they won't.
That's just the budget amount for those positions. I mean, we would have to track.
So if you did what the county executive is proposing, you couldn't fill any of these positions?
No, we can. We do have flexibility, again, in these 11 that are in pre-development, which is about 1.5 million. And with the budget amount for those 11 in pre-development is approximately $1.5 million. And then we do anticipate retirements, just natural turnover and underfilling. And obviously, as you mentioned, we're not going to fill all of these 16 positions right at July 1. Some of them are very technical, and it will take time to fill them. And, obviously we'll work hard to get them filled because they're critical needs. And then again, we're partnering with OMB, and should there be funding needs that we need to move forward with these enterprise initiatives, we would work with them to make sure that we have the funding needed to do that.
And these positions are mission critical positions.
We're at this conversation opened up my eyes too, as a chief budget officer too, that, no longer do we have the flexibility in labs. I mean, we're tight. We have to carefully manage our current labs target as it is.
Right,
so eliminating additional positions would make it even more challenging.
All right, so if 1.5 million to the 11 pre-development positions and 2.2 million to the other 16, you're filling the other 16. So your wiggle room, if these numbers are right, your wiggle room is $500,000 for if you fill all of these positions all at once, plus the time at which it takes for them to come on. So you only have 500,000 of laps that's baked into these positions if they're what is paying for your other laps, unless you have 3.3 million of retirements and departures.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge. And then we have these 11 positions that, again, are in pre-development. And the contractor conversions, those are operating budget savings and not in our personnel costs. So what is happening is our personnel costs are increasing as we convert them. So that's also contributing. And I hope to work with OMB going forward just to address our lapse issue for FY25 budget development.
So how much do you expect to save from the contractor conversions?
So 3 of the conversions, we have an estimate. For 3 of the conversions, we have an estimated savings of $451,000. That's just to convert 3 positions of those 16.
Okay, so how many of so we have, of the 16, how many of those are contractor conversions? The 16 that you're filling today.
3.
So you should know this.
Well, no, 16 that we're filling.
Well, you're in the process, various levels
3
of process, but not
them.
necessarily recruiting today, but you're in the process of recruiting. 3 for a savings of $451,000. Of the 11, how many would you expect would entail a contractor conversion? How many of those job descriptions are currently contractor?
We haven't identified those specifically for contractor conversions yet. We are focused on these 16 right now, and those 11 positions are helping us, one, achieve our labs, and also give us the flexibility when these other urgent needs come to the department. So we do have a potential of like I said, we have 66 contractors, and we have a possibility of converting half of those, given the time to do that.
You understand, though, that it's how it's, and I understand the department has had challenges that it is working through that were not of the doing of the current leadership, that are being addressed with haste, and I appreciate that. I just want to acknowledge that again. However, you do understand what you're essentially saying is that these pre-development positions are a reserve account that you are using to address needs that come up. They're really not positions.
They are positions, and we have discussed the needs for them, but we're not actively working on those right now.
But even in the current environment, they're being used in order to address. If you figured out an urgent need on July 2nd, none of these pre-development positions would be available to you to address that need. 0. Because you would initiate a process that would take months to figure out, just realistically. Before you would have someone encumbered in that position, it would, if you're lucky, it would be 6 months. If you're lucky, right? I mean, just by the time you get the position, you work through it, you manage all the processes that you're talking about, if you're lucky. And that's assuming this happens on day 1. So the likelihood of what you're actually using, and I'm not saying I'm necessarily opposed to this, because you might not have a choice. You've somewhat convinced me to a certain extent, but I am very concerned about what this has exposed. You're essentially using the funding that's in that position in order to move it in other ways to fund other needs to be able to handle mission critical issues. Because if something takes 6 months to do, it's not, it's not solving an urgent need.
So I would say under the current leadership, we haven't used funds in that fashion for mission critical initiatives.
Ms. Rupp, can you talk a little bit?
Sure. Sorry. So I would say today no to that. I would say no to that, and I would say from a philosophical standpoint, it was one of the things that we addressed immediately. So what is happening today is that we used vacancies for labs, but we have not used vacancies for mission.
And you've been successful in that. I want to point out they're going from 10% to 4% is reflective of your efforts to change that.
But it's a process, of course.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
I'll yield back.
Okay, thank you. And I think we can move on from here. I think that this is obviously a department in transition, and we appreciate the conversation we had earlier this week and the conversation that we had today, and the work that you all are doing. I think moving forward, the committee accepts the, what are we accepting? What is?
Please tell me.
What you had put before us in terms of your recommended budget. I do. I want to go back to the website. So I do want to go back to the website. Sorry, before letting you go. We're not going to take additional laps. We understand the precarious.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
We thank you for all the work that you have done this week, and Seamus, thank you for all the work that you have done this week in answering our questions. I know there's a lot of moving parts in your department, and this was incredibly helpful. I do want to come back to the website because, as you've heard, the budget that we are looking at, and the conversation we just had about the grants management, putting on reconciliation even at a high recommendation from the committee of an item of $1.5 million still has a high risk of not making it, quite frankly. I read the request for proposal that was put out and the other information you've shared with us. I guess my question to you would be, since that was just released on April 15th, you're waiting for responses, there's still a lot of investigative work happening and thinking about what needs to be done. Is there a amount less than 1.5 that could go into the budget to get the work on the website started and not halt it completely? I'm just going to be honest with you, thinking about what's going on in other committees and what's happening, it's going to be hard even to get our highly recommended, high priority issues off. And as Council Vice President Friedson said, a $1.5 million item is probably going to be tough as well. So I'd like to see us proceed in some manner with the website this year, and I'm asking, is there a way to do so for less money?
So I would say this. I would say that we could go back and do some further research in dissecting this initiative. I just want to emphasize that website is our face to the public.
Yes.
That it also is just not about people coming into the website, viewing and looking at initiatives or for entertainment purposes. There are quite a few opportunities, and we use that website to do a lot of the grant funding during COVID. If we go into a recession next year, we don't know where we'll be. So when we say website, yes, that's what it is. But it's also a way for citizens to gain services. And I think maybe if we go back, dissect the initiative, and maybe look at some of what we find to be most problematic about the website, if there's governance challenges there, there are maintenance challenges. It is not in the cloud. It needs to be in the cloud. So maybe if you have some patience to give us an opportunity to go back and look at what we might do to take it in a phased approach. I personally, even if I were in a consulting capacity, I don't like to see projects like this underfunded or partially funded when you have vendors contractually involved, because it becomes a challenge. But yes, we'll go back and
And I know sometimes when you do phase-in projects like that, you end up spending more money than
absolutely
if you had done it all at once.
absolutely, because you can't have things happening at the same time.
Yeah.
And we want to avoid coming back for a supplemental at
Yeah.
all, at all costs.
Yeah.
So
We appreciate it.
we that was a lesson we learned. So the 1.5 million is the best estimate we have for the contractual services. So in order to go forward with the contract, you need full appropriation. So that's going to be a challenge too. If we chicken and egg, but this is what industry standards are, and that's what our estimate was based on.
Yes, we did do some research, but we will go back and look to see if there is some other approach that we can take.
Great. Councilmember.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with the chair. If there's a possibility for a lesser price, I think we should try that. I don't know that it's going to be successful, but I think we should try it. I think that the website, beyond everything else that you do, and you do so much good work, but the website really is the face of Montgomery County anymore.
Absolutely.
If someone's in California and they're thinking about bringing their business to Montgomery County, Maryland, they're going to look at our website. And so it's an economic development tool, it's a communication tool, yada, yada, we can go down the list. So I think we can't be cheap, but we can try to be as economically aware as we possibly can be. But I do believe this is a necessary tool. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Council Vice President Friedson.
Thanks. I'm happy to be frugal, but I appreciate the comments of colleagues, appreciate the chair's interest in seeing if there's a different way of doing this that could address the challenges that we have in this budget. I do think that this is going to be a hard one to get off the list, whatever list it is on. I personally do not put it at the same level of urgency as some of the mission critical things that were noted. I do think we have to choose, and I'm not going to ask you to pick among your children and say, would you rather us take vacancies or do this? I think I know the answer to that, but I understand you're not putting anything forward to us that you don't think is important, so I'm not going to ask you to do that. But I did have a question about this. Are there positions associated with the $1.5 million expenditure? So I think there was some confusion and some information that was sent to us about this.
No, there are no positions.
Yeah, so it's exclusively all 1.5 million are in a contract.
Consulting and training, cloud storage.
Because there was information on this that was sent to us that included positions, but I think it may have just been conflating two different issues. Okay, so I just wanted to clarify that. So 1.5 million. So what would be helpful for me, and maybe I guess we're gonna take it to the full council, and the full council will decide. So prior to that, since we're not taking a committee position today, although I think I've made my position somewhat clear here, I've proven today I could be convinced otherwise. I came out firing pretty strong. And I think it does demonstrate the fact that I do have a lot of faith in the department's leadership, and I just want to note that again. But it would be helpful to know similar scoped projects in other jurisdictions and how much they spent for them. I mean, I'll say 1.5 million sounds like a whole lot of money to me for a website. Now, I understand you don't view it as a website, you view it as an integrated technology tool or something very impressive.
So think about the number of departments that it supports. It's like how many departments are there? 24 different departments, public safety, and they each have a different vision and a different mission and a different message, and trying to find some way to manage all of that. So it's 9 million hits a year. So it's very complex. It really is very complex from the standpoint that if we were doing this for one company, then we would have one company's mission and vision, but we're doing it for.
Yeah, I appreciate it, but I mean, we like to think of ourselves as unique. We're really not. There are jurisdictions all over the country that look just like us. Across the river is a jurisdiction almost exactly like us, with some differences, but many similarities. Fairfax County, similar size. So and I'm not saying we have to compare ourselves to Fairfax on this particular item, but there are 3,000 counties in America. There have got to be at least a dozen that have done a website procurement, have moved to the cloud within the last 5 years or so, based on where things are. If you all are well connected in this world and you have access to Gartner and others that do this, and if you could share with me some similar scoped projects and what they did, what they accomplished, and how much they cost as kind of examples, I think that would be helpful.
Sure.
Thanks.
Great.
And when do you need this?
I forget when TEBS is coming before the full council. I think Mr. Howard is not. We'll get back to you.
Okay.
We're starting. It'll be I think Wednesday. Thursday,
We're on
Friday.
consent on Wednesday.
Mhm.
According
Yeah,
to the agenda,
I've already talked to Mr. Howard that I thought so that you all would move to a work session because, and again, this is where it gets a bit confusing with the new econ committee, because econ also reviewed the website, and they had put it as a high priority. And so I had already spoken to Mr. Howard about this earlier today, that it would be likely that this would move to a work session.
Okay.
So we can double check on when that'll be.
Thank you.
Early next week would be great.
Can I ask your indulgence in one last thing on page 6? Wait a minute. There's an item of $200,000 that was to be going to the reconciliation list as well, but hearing the discussion you had earlier this afternoon with another committee, I wanted to make sure that we weren't passing up on an opportunity. This is a cybersecurity identification project, which is not new. I'm thinking now you just authorized another department to not call itself new because it was already in existence. This is identity management system, which is not being introduced, but simply being extended to additional county licenses for additional. Would you indulge me to consider whether that could be made part of the budget rather than to go on the record? It's hugely important.
Yeah, I think that, thank you.
Yes.
Dr. Torrey, I think the way that we've been handling those before is that if there are continuations and there are licensing agreements that are just increasing in cost, but they're necessary to continue a function, then there's no reason to put those on reconciliation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just say, there have been some discrepancies between different committees that I've seen, so I think there's going to have to be a reconciliation of all of these anyway, so we just want it to be treated the same as we've treated others, I think.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. So,
all right.
I don't know what other committees have done, so.
No, I'm just, it's been a challenge sometimes.
Yeah.
So you will be coming back, we will be going to full council on the new website issue.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that all the other TEBS budget?
That is a question above my pay grade. So I think that is a question as the council president is figuring out how we're going to, what is going on consent agenda and what are going on work session and how that will be. I can say that if it's a work session and the department is coming before the full council, council members may have questions on a number of items on the budget. So to me, the outstanding question based on our recommendation moving forward is just the website.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and I think.
You're right, Sana.
Well, I think the determination will be based on whether the last item is considered a high priority or not, because the standard was if there are high priority items, they automatically go to a discussion to allow other council members to determine whether to lower them or not. And if not, then they don't. And other than that, I think the website, so.
The website's just it, yeah.
So other than that, there's nothing else on the reconciliation list from the department besides the 2 items.
Yeah. Great. Awesome. All right. Thank you again for all your work on this.
Thank you.
And we are done for Government Operations and our Fiscal Policy Committee.
Couldn't found
Thank
a
you.
better thing to do on a Friday.